Chapter 3:18. The thick smell of blood shrouded Qing Yun Hill Tong Tian Peak, even the usually lazy mountain guarding spiritual beast water unicorn. Right now also appeared anxious and uneasy, constantly swam back and forth in the icy cold pool, making low growls. And the good faction masters standing in the crystal hall, each and every one of them looked grim, looking down the mountain. After the Rainbow Bridge was the huge cloud sea square. Right now, an intense and cruel battle had already been going on for a day and a night. Although they had already expected this battle of the demon beasts to be horrifying and tragic, but the cruelty of the scene still made many of the good faction feel a chill in their hearts. The demon beasts attacked from the foot of the mountain, along the way like a storm sweeping over. Although the good faction people kept attacking from the side, but the huge torrent formed by the demon beasts did not care about the few enemies who were attacking from the side. Like thunder rumbling like a raging tide, swept up, those who stood in front were instantly defeated. And the people surrounding the ambushers all felt a sense of helplessness, facing the black mass, killing one or two or even a dozen demon beasts. It was almost nothing. And like that, the good faction's original plan to use the mountain terrain to slow down the demon beast's attack in a blink was completely destroyed by these seemingly cruel and ignorant beasts. The good faction people were forced to retreat to Tong Tian Peak until the demon beasts attacked the Cloud Sea Square. Reverend Daoxian and the rest made a prompt decision, gathered most of the good faction forces, facing the enemy at the huge Cloud Sea Square for a moment. In the sky full of magical weapons, above Tong Tian Peak, flesh and blood splattered, miserable cries and howls were heard incessantly. The tide of darkness crazily surged in wave after wave, and in front of them, hundreds of good faction people, half standing on the ground, the other half flying in the air, countless gorgeous lights in front of the crowd, impressively built a colorful ice-cold wall, blossoming with cold light. The demon beasts seemed to not know pain and fear, like a tide surging over, in front of the light wall, which was almost several miles wide, with their flesh and blood bodies. The next moment, the cold light trembled, strange lights flashed chaotically, terrifying sounds like dense rain instantly swept over Tong Tian Peak, straight into the depths of the heart. The hundreds of demon beasts of the front were instantly minced into pieces by the cold light. The thick smell of blood like a gale brushed past the ears. The sky full of blood exploded with a loud bang, and then slowly fell, bit by bit, landed on the good faction people's faces, hands. Nauseous. Before they could compose themselves, the following demon beasts had already surged over again. The flat light wall immediately like it was being pressed by a huge force. Many were pressed in, showing irregular curves. In fact, there were even a few places where the weaker disciples, whose minds were not strong enough, were a bit too soft. The magical treasures were not well controlled, and a huge force surged towards them. Amidst the roars, the demonic beasts instantly pounced on them, throwing them to the ground. Amidst the miserable screams, no one saw their figures again. Outside the crystal hall, Reverend Daoxian, Pu Hong Master, and Reverend Daoxian glanced at both of them. Both of them nodded at the same time. Of Yun of the hall. Reverend Daoxian expressionlessly turned back, looked down the mountain for a while, saw above the sea of clouds. That light wall was being pressed down by a huge black tide, and there were a few weak spots that were on the verge of collapse. Looked like it would not be able to hold on any longer. Tragic cries were heard from time to time, and the stench of blood in the air was getting stronger. He frowned, suddenly raised his head, high up in the sky. The dark clouds were heavy. In the midst of the wind and clouds, he could still vaguely see that mysterious figure. Reverend Daoxian stared deeply. After a moment, turned his head. Xiao Yikai, who had been following behind him, took a step forward. Reverend Daoxian lightly said, "You go." Xiao Yikai responded and quickly turned around. With a wave of his right hand, he took the lead and flew up. Behind him were nearly 100 people from the righteous path. Although their numbers were not as many as those in the Cloud Sea Square, the dazzling lights of their magic weapons were far more dazzling than those disciples below. At a glance, it was obvious that they were the elite disciples of the righteous path and some loose immortals. Under Xiao Yikai's lead, this group of people flew down towards the Cloud Sea Square, where the battle situation was tense. Thunder roared, lightning scurried in the sky, as if returned to that rain many years ago. But for some reason, Even in this rainy day, there was still a strange moon in the sky, very bright and very white. The feeling of rain on his face, so cold, Shah Danan turned his head. The wind and rain howled. That little village finally quietly disappeared. He involuntarily reached out his hand, wanted to grab something, but it was empty. Only behind him, Posey's pair of eyes quietly watched his figure. The next moment, he was already in that familiar room. The unique atmosphere of Bamboo Peak rose around, so close and familiar. There was the laughter of his Xixiang's, Big Yella and Ash's playful sound. There was also the familiar footsteps. A girl with a flower-like smile rushed into the room, smiled and shouted, "Big lazy bug, quickly get up, go to the mountain to do your homework and chop bamboo." His body was trembling suddenly. The heart defense dam that was built in his heart for decades was broken, collapsed. His face was full of tears. A withered hand reached out from behind, lightly patted his shoulder. That kind voice asked quietly, "What is it, child? Why are you crying?" Shah Danan suddenly turned back, looked at that kind face. His body couldn't help but tense up. He stared deeply at that pair of eyes, trying to see the depth of this kind old monk's heart. But Posey's eyes were always so calm and deep. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't see through it. Word by word, he asked in a low voice, "Why? Why? 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 Did you choose me? Why did you do this?" Posey didn't answer. He was still looking at Shah Danan with that kind and compassionate look. His eyes were only filled with kindness and peace, not to mention any emotion, not to mention any regret. Everything around them disappeared once again, and they were the only two people left in the world. Shah Danan. No. Looking at him now, he was like a devil incarnate. The fierce red eyes once again occupied his eyes. From head to toe revealed a murderous intent. Puff! The clothes in front of his body split open. The soul-absorbing stick flashing with dark red light rose up in front of his chest. Pooji's gaze finally shook a little, slowly looking towards that fiendish object. At the top of the soul-absorbing stick, that sinister orb was glowing brightly. The dark red bloodlines all over the orb seemed to be staring at him with a cold, mocking intention. An unstoppable, bloody smell suddenly appeared out of thin air from Ghostly's body, and then with the force of toppling the mountains and overturning the seas, like a violent gale blowing past, Pooji monk robe fluttering, staring blankly, that savage red light with despair, like a trapped beast charging over. He didn't have any intention to avoid, stood there, motionless. The next moment, that desperate and ferocious red light passed through his body, slowly stopped behind him, condensed into Ghostly's figure. The old monk slowly lowered his head, slowly looked at his own body. Then he sighed, his head drooped down, his body slowly fell to the side. Behind him, Ghostly abruptly turned around, looked at Posey, the expression on his face like a violent storm, rapidly changing. Gradually, the ferocious expression quietly faded. The pain surfaced again. The red light in his eyes dimmed. He stared blankly at that body that seemed to be gradually losing its life. Instantly, made a heart-wrenching roar. The black stick fell to the ground. He seemed to have lost all his strength in that instant. Thunder rumbled in the sky. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. In the howling wind and rain, a chill fell on his heart. He stumbled towards Pooji. The ground under his feet seemed to have become muddy. Every step exhausted him. He kept falling down and getting up again, using all his strength to crawl towards the skinny body. Finally, he struggled to the side of Pooji. He tightly grasped that withered palm. For the past 10 years, this was the most intimate palm he had ever held in his hand. Unexpectedly, his eyes were already hazy with tears. "Sure fu, sure fu." He choked, quietly shouted, tears streaming down his face, with a bit of hysteria. Why is this?" Pooji laboriously turned his head, looked at this young man who seemed to have once again become that helpless young man. Did not answer. Only his face was that pale, his lips moved slightly, but in the end he did not say anything. The withered palm, slowly raised, reached to the young man's face. That hand kept shaking in the wind and rain. The wind blades and rain arrows seemed to fall into his hand. Shah Danan stopped crying, raised his head, looked at him. Their eyes met in the wind and rain, looked at each other, frozen, still, unfamiliar, estranged. Posy's lips moved, seemed to want to say something, but did not. Then his hand gently fell without any sound. Life seemed to leave in an instant. That young man was stunned, his entire body like stiffening, slowly lowered his head, looked at his own hands. I killed him. I killed him. Like the surrounding strange atmosphere, his body also started to change strangely. For a moment, his face revealed a ferocious expression, transformed into ghostly. For a moment, he looked like he was in unbearable pain, as if he had turned into the once simple Qing Yun disciple Sha Danan. Beside Posy's corpse, he struggled in pain. In the sky, under the firmament, the wind and rain were still howling, desolate. Xiao Yikai and the rest of the elite disciples joined the battle, immediately stabilized the situation. And this group of disciples clearly already had a tacit understanding. In groups of 3 to 5, flew straight to the most strained battlefield. Those openings that were attacked by the demon beasts suddenly received the strong support of these fresh troops. Immediately rebounded back. The attacking demon beasts were all killed in a blink of an eye. The entire light screen also became even more solid and resplendent, indestructible. Among the crowd, the most dazzling place was at the center of the light screen, Anan holding Tianya's celestial sword, like a fairy from the ninth heaven, proudly standing in the clouds. In the brilliant rays, Tianya seemed to have turned into a bloody slaughtering knife. Wherever it passed, blood rain flew, broken bones piled up into a small hill under her feet. After a while, not only those ferocious demon beasts also had some misgivings towards this cold lady whose white clothes had turned pink. Even the good faction people behind Lu Sueki were all shocked. In this battle of life and death, Anan actually regarded life and death as nothing, galloped unhindered, often killed into the group of demon beasts in the nick of time, stirring up waves after waves of carnage. Just that, on her face, there was not the slightest expression, no fear or pain, no fear or disgust. Even when the reeking blood splashed on her, who had always loved cleanliness, Anan did not have any reaction. She only fought like this, using all of her strength. Amidst the rain of blood and stench of blood, her cold yet beautiful face seemed to be exceptionally captivating. It made people suddenly feel apprehensive, but they didn't dare to approach her at all. An hour quietly passed. The black torrent was still pressing against that light screen, but in the end did not break through. The once fairyland-like clouds sea square. Everywhere were lifeless bodies and bloodstains in the dark sky. Dark clouds hovered low, coldly watching everything. Suddenly, deep within the demon beasts, from an unknown place, a strange sound suddenly sounded, like a bugle horn, also like a howl. The sound sounded mournful and desolate, like a full moon night, a lone wolf howling to the moon. Following this sound, the onslaught of demon beasts suddenly stopped their attack, and then slowly retreated, pulling apart the distance between them and the good faction. And on the good faction side, the light screen also following the temporary halt of the battle, one after another dimmed down, followed by, instantly filling the cloud sea, was the sound of countless people panting. Every one of them seemed to be reeking of blood. The desolate and strange blood color dyed the entire sea of clouds. In the middle of the sea of clouds that both sides pulled apart, corpses were everywhere. Some were demon beasts, some were human disciples. Most of the good faction disciples who were flying in the air all landed down, grasping the time to catch their breath. Nobody knew when those crazy beasts would attack again. Only a few highly skilled disciples were still vigilantly flying in the air, watching ahead. Xiao Yikai frowned tightly, looked away from the distance. The demon beasts were everywhere, black and dense, unable to see the end, this life and death battle. Until now he still could not see a bright future. He gently sighed his heart, turned his head, suddenly startled. Not far from him, Anan quietly stood in the air. The bloody wind blew over. Her blood-stained clothes gently swayed. There was not a single trace of anger on her beautiful face. She only stared unblinkingly at the black torrent in front of her. Xiao Yikai frowned, intuitively felt that Anan's mood was not right, was about to go up and ask. Suddenly from the demon beasts ahead, a roar was heard again. The next moment, thunder-like galloping footsteps, like toppling the mountains and overturning the seas, the black torrent once again charged over. And this time, among the demon beasts, other than those ferocious demon beasts, there were several extremely huge evil beasts, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, charging towards the good faction. The next moment, the good faction people all stood up, brilliant scattered light weapons danced in the sky, once again forming a grand light screen wall. Xiao Ikai's attention was immediately attracted, and the little bit of doubt he had towards Lu Sueki just now was completely forgotten. Right now, in everyone's eyes, there was only that black torrent, from far to near, surging and whistling, carrying the smell of death, surging over. As if in the silence, a sudden clap of thunder, tearing the heaven and earth, this time the deafening sound, burst out from the black torrent on the light screen dam. The pressure of death seemed to instantly become heavier. The broken corpses again fell like rain, the torn bodies thrown up into the air, pierced on the sharp claws. The huge evil beasts that joined the battle were far more powerful than the ordinary demon beasts. The ordinary good faction magical weapons hitting them did not have the slightest effect. And the claws of these evil beasts flew past. Instantly, it was a sea of blood. In a blink, the good faction people who were caught off guard were led by these 7 or 8 huge evil beasts, forcibly broke a few holes. The entire light screen immediately tottered, extremely strenuous. High up, Yin Elon, Puhong Master, and the rest countenances changed. Yin Elon frowned, looked at Reverend Daoxian but saw Reverend Daoxian's solemn face. Watching the battle situation below, miserable cries were heard. The corner of his eyes seemed to be twitching, but for some reason, his refined face in the end did not have any expression, not a single word or expression. Yin Elon looked away, was silent for a moment, again looked down the mountain. The battle situation became more and more intense. The good faction disciples above Yunhai all knew that the crucial moment had arrived. Everyone was fighting with their lives on the line, exerting all their strength. Even most of them at this moment were making hysterical cries, not much different from those demon beasts. Perhaps even the cultivators, when facing a life and death situation, were not much different from those demon beasts. Chapter 319. The seemingly endless flood of demon beasts, wave after wave crazily charged up, with those huge demon beasts as the arrowheads, ferociously struck the good faction light screen. Watching the light screen on the verge of collapse, the young disciples beside him also started to show faint fear. Xiao Ikai frowned tightly, knew that if they did not defeat these leading demon beasts, most likely the situation would get out of hand. Xiao Ikai immediately shouted, called the surrounding disciples, took the lead and charged towards one of the huge demon beasts nearby. Just that his body had just moved, before he could fly out a few steps, suddenly a gust of wind swept past behind him. A figure like lightning dashed out, straight towards that demon beast. Xiao Ikai glanced at that figure, was stunned, although that figure was dyed bright red, but her figure was graceful, cold, and beautiful. It was Lu Sueki. Above the innumerable black demon beasts and good faction disciples' light screen, Lu Sueki, as if going against the wind, dashed towards that demon beast, which was several times bigger than herself. Another figure dashed out from the side. It was Zheng Shu, his originally delicate and handsome body and now stained with blood, anxiously said to Xiao Ikai, Xiao's senior brother, "Let's quickly go help her." Xiao Ikai quickly nodded, rushed up. That huge demon beast opposite them was the huge white bone snake that appeared in the southern border Miao people's 7-mile cave under the black clouds. Its bones showed a strange pale color, and the 3 pairs of brightly colored wings, which kept vibrating on its back, were directly connected to the white bones, looked even more strange. Right now, the snake coiled up its nearly 3 zhongs long, huge body, flapping the 3 pairs of wings on its back. The snake's forked tongue kept flicking, spitting out waves of black gas, glaring angrily at the good faction light screen. Each time its giant head swept past, there would immediately be a lower-leveled good faction disciple dying, either bitten to death by this huge mouth or unable to withstand the black poisonous gas. The poison attacked the heart and killed. The snake killed many people in succession, watching the good faction disciples fleeing in all directions before it. Its huge mouth opened and closed, although no expression could be seen on its face, but it was obviously extremely arrogant. Just as it was feeling complacent, a white figure suddenly flashed in front of it. There seemed to be a light shout. The voice was cold. A beautiful woman appeared in the air. The blue immortal sword in her hand flickered with brilliant light, slashing down from the sky. White Bone Snake made a hissing sound, did not have the slightest intention of dodging, disregarding the Tianya celestial sword. Opened its huge mouth, revealing two huge white fangs, bit down towards Anan. Looking at the fangs that seemed to be larger than a human, glimmering with cold white light, descending from the sky, Lu Sweki facing this terrifying scene, her face was still cold, without any expression, even more like she did not put the snake in her eyes. Tianya's celestial sword's light became even brighter, charging up to the sky, in the midst of the black energy, like a phoenix crying in the nine heavens. In that instant slash, the black energy split the dark clouds before the snake could react. It had already struck 3 chi below the snake's head. A deep muffled sound seemed to burst out from the depths of the body. At first it was a low sound, but in a blink it was like a ferocious beast's roar. The snake was stunned for a moment, temporarily stopped its attack, looked down at its chest bones, near where it was struck by Tianya. Faint cracks suddenly appeared, following which it rapidly expanded. The next moment it emitted a crackling sound, splashed and shattered. Tianya's celestial sword was the nine-heaven celestial weapon. Even this kind of unparalleled demon was also injured by Tianya's sword. The white bone snake let out an earth-shattering roar. 2 balls of willow wisp flames suddenly shot out from its sunken eyes. It was obviously extremely enraged. Disregarding the others, its giant head swayed, directly pouncing towards Anan. And in that instant, Xiao Yikai, Zheng Shu, and the rest had already arrived, shouted in unison. Their magical weapons and celestial swords flew up at the same time. Together with Anan Tianya's celestial sword, they blocked the snake's thunderous attack. But a deafening sound was heard. The lights scattered. Xiao Yikai and the rest shook greatly, almost struck down from the air. Fortunately, they were all outstanding among the younger generation. Their skills were not shallow. Each of them steadied themselves, but when they looked at each other, they were already pale. This kind of terrifying demon, its demonic power was really unexpected, even with all of them joining hands. It was still extremely strenuous, not to mention that behind it there was still the extremely mysterious beast deity. On the other hand, the white bone snake demon, although it was able to shake off all of them, but none of them were ordinary people. The magical weapons in their hands were not ordinary. Several blue, white, and yellow rays of light shot up, heavily hitting the white bone snake's head. One of them even cracked a small piece of bone. The snake again roared loudly. The willow wisp in its eyes burned even brighter, almost without rest. Again attacked crazily. Obviously, it hated these people to the core. Xiao Yikai, Anan, Zheng Shu, and the rest all flew up. The snake was too ferocious. No matter what, they could not block it. And this time, with its huge mouth attacking, a thick black poisonous gas was spat out from its mouth. From afar, it made one want to vomit. They could not resist, relying on their agility, surrounded the huge body of the demon and attacked. In the field, the demon beasts had a total of 6 huge demon beasts, but after the initial panic, with Xiao Yikai and the rest leading the elite disciples, at least a few, at most a dozen of them fought off these demon beasts. Although due to their powerful demonic powers, not only they could not win, instead it was extremely strenuous, but in the end they managed to stabilize the situation. Without these huge demon beasts, facing the ordinary demon beasts, the good faction disciples immediately felt emboldened. The chaotic situation also slowly stabilized. That light screen once again stabilized. Outside the crystal hall, Reverend Daoxian and the rest looked solemn, brows tightly frowned. The battle was intense, in the rain of blood and stench of wind, not knowing how many lives were lost in an instant. Reverend Daoxian watched the battle below. In the crowd, that seemingly endless black mass of demon beasts was still all right. Only those 6 huge demon beasts, right now, seemed to be fighting more and more valiant. Even with Xiao Yikai and the rest of the outstanding disciples, right now, they were also slowly showing signs of weakness. Looked like they could not hold on any longer. Reverend Daoxian looked solemn, watched for a moment, and then again looked up at the sky. The endless black clouds in the firmament rolled and surged, lower and lower. Yun Elon coughed, quietly said, "Daoxian, senior brother, the situation now, isn't it?" He did not continue, but what kind of person was Reverend Daoxian? Naturally understood. and the current battle situation was indeed critical. He turned and nodded to Yun Elon, said, "Valley head, rest assured." After speaking, he turned and looked behind him, saw that behind the three of them, several good faction elders were standing behind them. These people were either white-haired or sage-like. It could be said these Qingyun sect elders and the other branch of seniors were already the good faction's last battle force. Reverend Daoxian was silent for a long time, finally unhurriedly said, "Everyone, go down." No one spoke, only following Reverend Daoxian's words. These last several people either nodded slightly or cupped their hands in return, and then instantly light scurried. The last several good faction elders at the same time leapt up, flew down the mountain. And outside Crystal Hall, right now other than Reverend Daoxian, Puhong Master, and Yun Elon, there were still 6 people. They were Qingyun sect other than Tongtian Peak's 6 branches leaders. For some reason, unexpectedly, did not join the battle. Reverend Daoxian faced them, nodded, said, "Everyone, it seems the situation has reached a critical juncture. The matter that was originally discussed will have to depend on everyone." Among the 6 branches leaders, Kaheo and the rest of the newly appointed younger generation had always been respectful in front of him. Only Tian Bui, Zheng Shuchang, and Shuewen Master, these 3 looked calm. After hearing Reverend Daoxian's instructions, the others seemed to have known this would happen. Their faces did not show any shock. Only Tian Bai's face had an indistinct haze. Immediately, the 6 of them bowed to Reverend Daoxian and then flew up, but in different directions, looked like they were flying back to their own mountain range. Only Tian Bui, for some reason, stopped, turned and glanced at Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxian was surprised, said, "Tian Jr. brother, what is it?" Tian Bui hesitated for a moment, lowered his voice, said, "Sect head senior brother, after the Tianji seal is activated, Zhuxian Ancient Sword's vicious energy surged. The backlash force is unbearable. You must be careful. Don't lose your chastity." Reverend Daoxian was silent for a moment, his face solemn, nodded, said, "Tian Jr. brother, you and I have known each other for many years. I understand your intentions. Don't worry, even if something happens, for the common people, we cannot care so much." Chapter 320. Tian Bai's facial muscles twitched, but in the end he did not say anything. He looked at Reverend Daoxian's face, nodded his head, his sleeve shook, red and yellow light flashed, lifted him up, flew up to the sky, heading towards Big Bamboo Valley. The faint sounds of intense fighting could be heard from the front mountain. When it reached Tongtian Peak rear mountain, it gradually became inaudible. The mist dispersed, birds chirped faintly. This place seemed to be another world. Just that the same thing was, even in this tranquil place, there were still the shadows of swords, the bloody fight in the dark. The dark green dragon slayer's sword glimmered with faint light. The sore body also seemed to be trembling, as if mourning for something. That frail old man had lost his vitality, quietly lying on the ground, his head tilted to one side. Kneeling beside him, Lin Jingyu's face was terrifyingly red, a pair of eyes fluctuating with rage, his teeth clenched tightly, although he looked silent, but in this silence, indistinctly there seemed to be some insanity. In the shadows of the forest, the black Mr. Ghost still did not leave, like a ghost watching Lin Jingyu's figure from behind. His eyes turned from Wan Jingyi's lifeless body to Lin Jingyu, and finally to that dragon slayer's sword. Then he suddenly seemed to recall something, turned his head, looked towards the direction of the illusory moon cave. That road was cold and lonely. It extended forward in solitude, and no movement could be seen. Under the black veil, no one could see Mr. Ghost's expression. Lin Jingyu's mind right now was in a mess. Wan Jingyi's sudden death made him sink into an almost insane state of mind. Ever since that Qing Yun chaos 10 years ago, his teacher Taoist Song Song betrayed Qing Yun. Wan Jingyi's sudden appearance, his knowledge and magnanimity, all became the person Lin Jingyu revered. For the past 10 years, he trained hard under Wan Jingyi's nurturing. In his heart, he had already regarded this extremely mysterious old man as half teacher and half father, extremely respectful. And right now, this person whom he respected the most had already become a corpse, lying before his eyes, and he did not even know who the murderer was, not to mention avenging him. Sadness, pain, and despair, agitated Lin Jingyu's originally somewhat extreme character made him look closer and closer to insanity. At this moment, a strange sound came from the forest behind him. Lin Jingyu's body shook violently. He quickly turned around to look, only to see the forest swaying. There was a figure suddenly flashing out from the forest, and then as fast as lightning, he dashed out. The speed was so fast that even with Lin Jingyu's eyesight, he could only see a blurry shadow. What did the sudden appearance of this mysterious person at this time and place signify? Lin Jingyu's body moved faster than his brain. Almost at the same moment, he grabbed the Dragon Slayer sword and chased after like the wind and lightning. He had never thought that if this person was really the murderer, with his skills to be able to kill Wang Jianyi, he would be such a terrifying person. In Lin Jingyu's heart, there was nothing else but revenge. Moreover, Wang Jianyi had taught him for 10 years. The dragon-slaying sword had always moved forward bravely, never retreating, just like their lives. That black figure was extremely fast. In a flash, it had already left the founder's ancestral hall, paused for a moment at the fork in the road, a sound, headed towards the small path of the illusory moon cave. Lin Jingyu chased after in a blink. His eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. Watching that indistinct figure, without thinking, his figure like lightning, instantly dashed into the small path, which was supposed to be the Qin Yun disciples' restricted area, towards the direction of the illusory moon cave. The mountain breeze blew over, the tree branches swayed gently, making rustling sounds. This place very quickly fell into silence. Only that desolate old man, quietly lying on the ground, watching the clouds in the sky, quietly drifting past. Along the way, although Lin Jingyu used all his strength, but he was still unable to catch up with that figure. The trees on both sides quickly retreated behind him, but that black figure was still faintly discernible. Right now the anger in Lin Jingyu's heart slightly subsided. He could not help, but secretly felt shocked. That mysterious person's skills were high. But even so, Lin Jingyu still did not slow down, still pursued with all his might. Just that at the corner ahead, that faint black figure suddenly dashed forward, entered the mountain's blind spot, disappeared from his sight. Lin Jingyu was furious and anxious, exerted all his strength, his entire body like an arrow leaving the bow, leaped up perfectly straight, a sound of breaking through the air along the way. Because the speed was too fast, there was a sharp whistling sound. Just that when he reached the corner of the mountain, although it was only a short while, that black figure had already disappeared. What appeared before him was an ordinary cave, for big words were engraved at the entrance. Illusory Moon Cave. Lin Jingyu was startled, paused his steps. He had been in Qin Yun sect for many years. Naturally, he would not know that this was Qin Yun restricted area. It had always prohibited Qin Yun disciples from entering. Now that he had trespassed into the restricted area, it was already a big crime. But when he looked around, he only saw dense, ancient trees. Other than this cave, there was nothing unusual. That figure just disappeared like that. The expression on his face kept changing. Hesitation flashed past, just that a pair of eyes glinted with a strange light. The anger in the end still prevailed. He lifted his feet, as if hesitating, but the next moment he took the first step forward, walked towards that cave. Different from when he was chasing just now. Right now, Lin Jingyu walked very, very slowly, as if there was something in that ordinary cave that made him hesitate. But even so, he still very quickly reached the cave entrance. After inhaling deeply, Lin Jingyu gritted his teeth and walked in. The cave was very small. With one glance, he could see almost everywhere. There was no trace of a human figure. Lin Jingyu was stunned for a moment. A trace of disappointment flashed past his face, but following which his eyes landed on the only conspicuous place in the cave, Taiji diagram embedded on the stone walls. The Taiji diagram, reflected in his eyes, seemed to be narrating to him the vicissitudes of time. The dilapidated edges exuded an ancient smell. Lin Jingyu stared intently at this Taiji diagram. After a long time, he slowly stretched out his hand, placed it on this Taiji diagram. The material, neither stone nor jade, with a trace of roughness, sharpened the edges of his palm. There was no reaction. Lin Jingyu's eyes were bright. He tried to turn to the side. Without any warning, even the stone wall itself did not have the slightest change, but suddenly from that Taiji diagram, a gush of blazing energy in an instant attacked Lin Jingyu's arm. Lin Jingyu could not react in time. His entire arm seemed to be roasting in the blazing flames. The blood in his body boiled. The next moment his face was as red as blood, his forehead full of sweat. He did not expect that such an ordinary Tai Chi diagram would hide such a shocking Taoist prohibition spell. Shocked, Bei subconsciously wanted to retract his arm, but unexpectedly his arm was firmly held by that invisible force, and he could not pull his arm back even if he wanted to. And at the same time, the surrounding cave walls suddenly started to emit muffled sounds, as if something was startled and was about to wake up from its slumber. The surrounding strange noises became louder and louder, gradually gathered towards Lin Jingyu's body, and the area in front of his palm, after only a short while, had already become unbearably hot. Lin Jingyu, in his panic, clenched his teeth. His body was almost about to explode from the heat. He could only use all of his skills to resist, using Qing Yun sect Taiji, Xian Qing Tao skills that he had spent his entire life practicing to his palm, hoping to be able to resist that mysterious heat. Just when Lin Jingyu's head was spinning and his body was being roasted by the heat, suddenly, the mysterious heat from the Taiji diagram receded, and the receding speed was extremely fast, like the tide in an instant disappeared from Lin Jingyu's body. Even Lin Jingyu could not regain his senses for a moment. Following which, the surrounding strange noises seemed to be appeased, also slowly quietened down. The cave once again regained its tranquil atmosphere. Following Lin Jingyu's shock, that Taiji diagram rotated at the same time. A soft but different deep sound again came from the stone wall. In Lin Jingyu's astonished gaze, the stone wall, which had not the slightest crack, rotated to the sides, revealing an extremely strange cave entrance, and above the cave entrance, a strange mist-like gas was spinning rapidly. Inside it was hazy, mysterious, and unfathomable. Chapter 321. Like lightning tearing apart the night, descending into the mortal world, that light beam that gathered true power suddenly descended from the sky, right above the white bone snake, pierced through its head. In an instant, a huge force burst out from that huge body. The few Qing Yun disciples who were fighting in the surroundings were all pushed far away by this invisible and substantial air current. The white-boned demon snake faced the sky and let out a long roar. Its voice was mournful, and the huge skeleton that supported its body suddenly began to emit a strange light. After a moment, there was a caw-caw sound coming from countless places, and rays of light were projected from its skeleton. After that, with a loud bang, the demon snake's huge body suddenly collapsed, smashing a big hole in the hard white jade floor. After struggling on the ground for a few times, it finally stopped trembling. The dazzling light beam slowly dispersed, revealing the 7 elders, Lu Sueki, Xiao Yikai, and the rest floating in the sky, and below them, beside the huge monster's body, corpses littered the ground. Among them lay the 4 Qing Yun elders' bodies forever. And among those who were still alive, there were even more wounded. Among the younger generation, Lu Sueki's face was as cold as frost, but her clothes were already mostly red. Xiao Yikai was still fine, looked fine. Only Zheng Shushu was holding on. Seeing that the huge monster finally died, he heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly his head tilted, fell down unconscious. Everyone was startled. Fortunately, Xiao Yikai was right beside Zheng Shushu. He caught his body and examined it carefully. He heaved a sigh of relief and signaled to the others that he was fine. Only then did everyone relax and continue to focus on the other battles. Ever since the good faction elders joined the battle, for the first time, the situation of this calamity war finally turned to the good faction's advantage. The cultivation and mana of these seniors far surpassed that of ordinary disciples, although there were not many of them, but the impact was quite huge. Under the joint attack of the elders, Xiao Yikai, Lu Sueki, Zheng Shushu, and the other young disciples, although the few huge monsters were extremely powerful, but they were still suppressed by these people and in the end were killed by them. But these monsters were after all ferocious, also made the good faction pay a heavy price. However, who would remember their fallen companions amidst such a storm of blood? The moment the huge body of the white-boned demon snake fell, the people floating high in the sky had already turned around, expressionlessly pouncing toward the other battle groups, continuing to kill and fight. Xiao Yikai flew to the back, placed Zheng Shu Shu at a secluded place and hurried back. Unexpectedly, in a blink of an eye, he saw Anan seem to be in a daze, staring blankly at the corpse, her face pale. Xiao Yikai felt strange and called out, "Junior Marshal Sister Lu, what's wrong?" Lu Sueki's body trembled, as if awakened from a dream. Turning around, his lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but when he saw that it was Xiao Yikai, he closed his mouth, took a deep breath, and flew away, rejoining the battle. Xiao Yikai felt bewildered, felt that Anan was very strange today, but when he recalled that this fairy-like junior sister was always aloof and cold, and now it was the crucial moment of the battle, he thought for a while, and again threw these thoughts to the back of his mind, again charged in. The dark clouds rolled over, rolling incessantly. Under the dark clouds, those beasts and the people were ferociously fighting each other. Just that the battle situation was becoming more and more advantageous, projected onto the faces of the three good faction leaders. Even their tensed expressions finally started to relax. Although they had paid a heavy price, after the elders joined the battle, the originally unstoppable momentum of the six gigantic demonic beasts was immediately stopped and gradually suppressed. Under the combined efforts of everyone, first was the white-boned demonic snake, then the other two gigantic demonic beasts were successively killed by everyone. Even when killing these huge monsters, including the elders, the good faction people also suffered heavy casualties, but the battle's momentum, bit by bit, was still turned around. Although the ordinary Qing Yin disciples were not as good as those outstanding ones, but dealing with these ordinary monsters was still more than enough, and with the people joining together, the light screen seemed even more indestructible. Although the ordinary Qing Yin disciples were not as good as those outstanding ones, but against these ordinary monsters, it was still more than enough, and with the people joining together, the light screen seemed even more indestructible. After dealing with half of the gigantic demon beasts, even more experts surrounded the remaining three gigantic demon beasts. Anyone could tell these gigantic demon beasts were the battle spirits of the beast demons. And under the siege of these highly skilled, righteous elders and the young generation's outstanding figures, in the sky full of scattered lights and all kinds of rare treasures, the remaining three giant beasts finally could not hold on any longer. In the sharp and angry mournful roars, they fell one by one. The demon beasts were in chaos. Clearly this situation made those ignorant demon beasts feel that something was not right. And on the contrary, on the good faction side, their morale was greatly boosted. Finally their fighting spirit soared. The resplendent light screen shone brightly, pressed outwards, immediately in the midst of flesh and blood flying. The demon beasts were pressed back. A wave of panic cries, countless of demon beasts howled to the sky, their voices mournful. The merciless light screen arrived with a loud crash. What kind of blood and sorrow splattered? And in these innumerable cries, in the sky, in the firmament, that rolling black clouds suddenly stilled, like this world suddenly solidified. And then there was that faint light from the dark and silent clouds, shot out, white, a tiny glimmer. Instantly, the black clouds dispersed with a loud crash, like a violent gale sweeping across the heaven and earth, blowing past the sky full of wind and rain. From the deepest part of the black clouds, suddenly an enormous whirlpool spun rapidly outwards. Numerous black clouds were swept up in it and then dispersed, leaving no trace. A youth figure appeared, expressionlessly looking at this war-torn mountaintop, the bloody world, looking down from above, like a legendary deity. His black hair fluttered in the wind. A black beast that fluctuated in size behind him seemed to be restlessly shifting its body, making a low, deep roar. And the moment he appeared, suddenly all of the demon beasts stopped, looked up to the sky, faced that figure, and howled to the sky. Thousands of beasts howled to the sky. The black clouds dispersed, as if a wave of evil energy was charging up to the sky, to the nine heavens. The good faction people's countenance did not change. Reverend Daoxian stood outside the crystal hall. His brows tightly frowned, quietly muttered to himself, "This is the beast deity?" Illusory moon cave. That dreamlike and illusory human world. That dim moon glimmering with a strange radiance, still hanging in the horizon, regardless of wind or rain, always emitting a faint light. And the people struggling in this world seemed to have dispersed, leaving only a lonely person, alone at a loss. "Who am I?" he softly asked, looked up at the moon. "What am I living for?" He asked faintly, not knowing if he was asking the moon in the horizon or speaking to his own heart. This half of his life had been full of ups and downs. The waves were ferocious. Scenes of the past surged into his heart. The people he was familiar with in his life, the people he had once treated sincerely in his heart, all of them flashed past his mind one by one. However, none of them left a single trace, and just like that, they quietly went far away. His heart seemed to be unwilling, subconsciously stretched out his hand, wanting to grab something, just that his hand was in the air. In the end, he still grabbed nothing. Nothing at all. Only the moonlight in the horizon, passed through the innumerable wind and rain, still landed on his body, shone on his clothes. Collapsing to the ground, as if he had torn off all his disguises, in this lonely world, he did not need to be strong. The storm gradually stopped. The dust quietly quieted. That body looked like it was about to sink into this desolate world, returning to silence. "You're dead." The ancient legend, once dead, there would no longer be pain and longing. There would no longer be any worries, even the 9 netherworlds, before Yin Luo Dian, who would know what kind of scene it was. The bustling human world, perhaps in the end it would be empty. Just that silent body suddenly shook again. The moonlight in the horizon seemed to tremble slightly, and then a beam of light shone down, spilling on that body. He actually seemed to struggle. He actually seemed to be unwilling. He struggled to climb up. Every movement seemed to use up all his strength. The ground under his feet clearly had endless temptation, tempting him to lie down and not have any worries, to be free from the pain of the world. Just that he refused to retreat, stubbornly wanted to straighten his body. His hand was bleeding. His lips were cut deep. In this bleak and desolate world, he actually still refused to give up. That faint moonlight, like pouring down, landed on his body, like a soft whisper. "Why must you persist? Let go. Let go and you'll be free." He struggled, like an ant in the boundless heaven and earth, just that no matter what, facing the seemingly boundless heaven and earth, he eventually still looked up, looked at the sky, slowly stood up. That familiar face quietly drifted in his heart. So even between life and death, in the end, he still could not give up. In this life, there must be someone he cared about. Zhang Xiaofan, or maybe Ghostly, this heaven and earth ant, right now was quietly looking at the sky, staring at the serene moon in the horizon. The moonlight was strange and serene cold. He suddenly shouted, leaped up, left this boundless land, straight up to the sky. In front of him, gold, green, red, 3-colored light suddenly brightened, along with his body, straight up to that serene moon. The moon was cold and silent, but in front of him, the moonlight suddenly dimmed. It was a couple figures mercifully and joyfully looking at him, as if that rainy night many years ago, the joy that descended into the human world. His heart felt like it was cut by a sharp knife. His entire body trembled, but his body, like an arrow leaving the bow, did not have any intention of retreating. The 3-colored light, like lightning, under his gaze, pierced into the couple's body, passed through. Like blood splattering, also like the howling of the wind and rain, hit on his face cold. The figures disappeared. He also seemed to be somewhat numb. Only his eyes were still determined, charging towards that serene moon. Suddenly, the moonlight dimmed again. Tian Bui and Suru's figures appeared. Suru looked at him with a smile. Tian Bui was like in his memory, snorted, rolled his eyes at him. In between the two of them, Tian Linger's smiling face was like a flower, dressed in red, vaguely looked like 16 or 17 years old, loudly laughed and shouted, "Little junior brother, let's go up the mountain to chop the bamboos." In that instant he seemed to suffocate. Those 3 figures were right in front of him, alive, blocking in front of him. What kind of trembling feeling was that? Like electricity passing through his body. The cold light was getting closer and closer to their figures. His heart also seemed to be torn apart. Finally, the 3-colored light still passed through, just like that, passed through the figures. A chill ran down his spine from head to toe. He was in midair, his face as white as paper. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood dyed his clothes red, and his face was drained of all color. Then, he still raised his head, like an indomitable, unrelenting arrow leaving the bow, charged towards that serene moon. The moonlight was cold, heaven and earth instantly dimmed, as if there was a sense of desolation quietly pervading. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, he was about to reach the moonlight when the misty clouds surged over. Suddenly, a figure faintly appeared in the clouds. What kind of figure was that, deeply engraved in his heart? He was suddenly dumbfounded. His body's perseverance seemed to dissipate with the wind. That indistinct figure in the clouds was turning chaotically, like a green figure, like a white figure dancing with a sword. The soul-absorbing stick in his hand emitted an icy chill. His heart once felt such pain because of that figure, just that, at this moment, how should he advance or retreat? In the deep night, the cold moonlight, far above the horizon, suddenly a heart-wrenching roar was heard, like a dying beast howling to the moon, filled with despair and pain. That brilliant light, flickering with 3 strange halos, charged up to the sky, straight into the clouds, passed through the clouds, pierced into that indistinct figure. Then, it was as if something had suddenly shattered, the wind and rain in the sky, just like that quietly stopped, hot tears in his eyes, staring at that figure. Perhaps she was close at hand, but he still could not see her face clearly. Just that, in the distant darkness, there seemed to be a low sigh. The wind dissipated, the rain dispersed. The moonlight fell like floating clouds. Heaven and earth, the firmament like water. His body fell from the sky, like falling into a bottomless abyss. But there was no fear in his heart. There was only some reluctance, staring at that gradually disappearing figure. The next moment, he had already landed on the ground. The surrounding illusions all disappeared. Under his feet, an unsophisticated and bright ancient mirror had already broken into several pieces, falling from the wall, scattered on the ground. And around him were simple and unadorned cave walls, hard rocks. The distance to the mystical cave entrance was only 10 steps away. In this short 10 steps, he seemed to have experienced a lifetime, all the painful memories, like this reincarnated once. Then, his breathing calmed down, composed himself, and was about to continue walking deeper into the illusory moon cave. Suddenly his body froze. As if he discovered something, he slowly turned around. Following the shattering of that ancient mirror, that mystical mist at the cave entrance also gradually dissipated, revealing a figure standing behind, lunging you. Both of their eyes met in the air. For a moment both were stunned. For a long time, they just stared at each other silently. The two men's gazes, from youth to youth till now, as if they had seen through a lifetime. Lin Jingyu's teeth bit his lips deeply, almost to the point of bleeding, then said word by word, "That old man in Founder's ancestral hall. Was it you who killed him?" Ghostly was silent, slightly lowered his head. After a moment, he gently nodded and said, "Yes." Lin Jingyu's eyes instantly turned red. Chapter 322. That youth in the sky, expressionless, his eyes swept across the battlefield below. Even when those huge demonic beasts that once protected him fell one by one, he did not seem to be moved, as if he had long seen through these life and death situations. A strong gust of wind blew past, and his figure slowly descended from the depths of the dark clouds. The roars of tens of thousands of beasts became more and more deafening. Even beside him, there were thin bolts of lightning slithering in the pitch-black clouds like spirit snakes. Above the sea of clouds, the people and beasts who were still fighting with all their might a moment ago all stopped, involuntarily looked at that strange youth in the sky. On his demonic face, there seemed to be 2 spots of light in his pupils. Finally, the beast deity stopped in the air, just above the innumerable demonic beasts. The ferocious beast Tao Tai behind him glared angrily, facing the good faction Tong Tian Peak direction, ferociously howled. Roar, almost at the same time. Following Tao Tai's howl, the beast followed and howled loudly. That sound wave came suddenly, but seemed to be able to topple the mountains and overturn the seas. For a moment the weather changed. Sand and stones flew. Many of the good faction people involuntarily retreated a few steps. Tao Tai's body in this howl suddenly expanded. In a blink it had already become a huge beast, surrounding the beast deity. And on their left and right, a strange situation also happened. The dark cloud in the air suddenly seemed to be affected by some kind of huge gravitational force, rapidly surged from all directions, gathered above the beast deity youth, and then gradually formed into an enormous black wind pillar, spinning rapidly, making a sharp piercing sound, slowly descending from the sky. That wind pillar was unimaginably thick at a rough glance. There was a feeling that it could swallow the entire Tongtian Peak. Right now, the sky was hanging low, the gale was biting cold. It was a cruel scene, like the end of the world was right before their eyes, made them feel despair. The good faction people's countenance changed. Such supernatural evil skills, it was really unseen, unheard of. Although they had long expected that this beast deity would not be an ordinary person, but they never expected that this evildoer would have such supernatural powers. And the legendary senior expert who was able to subdue him and suppress him in the subdued devil ancient cave for thousands of years, he really did not know who he was. Looking at the huge wind pillar slowly descending, gradually revealing that pitch-black and terrifying appearance, an invisible suction force slowly began to envelop everyone above the sea of clouds. Many of the good faction disciples had already begun to secretly circulate their chi to resist. Everyone knew, if they were sucked in by this evil technique, even if they had 9 lives, it would still be difficult to survive. Outside the Crystal Hall, Reverend Daoxian and the other 2 looked grim. Puhong Master looked at that enormous wind pillar for a long time, quietly said, "This kind of evil skill, it is really the first time I have seen it in my life. Senior Brother Daoxian, I'm afraid those disciples below might not be able to withstand this level of demonic art. Why don't we?" Reverend Daoxian slowly nodded, said, "Reverend is right. The main character has already appeared. We should also." Just as he finished speaking, the huge pillar of wind suddenly changed its original slow speed and fell an abrupt speed, charging straight into the sea of clouds. At the same time, the roars of the demon beasts intensified, piercing through the clouds, extremely mournful. The good faction people's countenance did not change. Facing this unprecedented strange evil skill, for a moment everyone did not know how to deal with it. Seeing that the pillar of wind was about to fall in the sea of clouds, there were several bold people among the righteous disciples who finally couldn't bear it any longer. With a loud shout, they were the first to take out their magic treasures and attack the storm. The old to the senior at the side immediately shouted to stop, but in this kind of chaotic situation, there were still a few people who rushed out. The few immortal sword magic treasures flickered with a treasure light. The dazzling light charged into the wind pillar, but in a moment, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. Not the slightest sound could be heard. Immediately after, as if it was alarmed by something, a burst of rumbling suddenly sounded out from the wind pillar, and several grayish-black thick whirlwinds that seemed to have a form rushed straight towards the few disciples. The good faction people were shocked. One after another defended. Unexpectedly, those few whirlwinds seemed to have spiritual energy. When the others were defending, like an invisible substance passed through, yet when it reached those few people, the black whirlwinds suddenly revealed their sinister face. In a mournful sound of the wind, those few whirlwinds in a blink entangled those few disciples, a sound and shrank back. The speed was so fast that the crowd could not react in time. Watched helplessly as those few disciples, under the protection of the crowd, were dragged into the strange, enormous wind pillar. Far away, miserable cries were heard indistinctly. In that wind pillar, suddenly blood-red light flashed. The next moment, there was no more. The good faction people kept quiet out of fear, looked at each other. Light suddenly rose. 3 beams of light descended from the sky, landed in front of the good faction people. After a flash, revealed Reverend Daoxian, Puhong Master, and Yun Elon. The 3 of them looked solemn. Reverend Daoxian waved his hand, anxiously said, "All disciples retreat. All elders stay here." There was a commotion in the crowd, but following which most of the younger generation disciples retreated. Most of them were the disciples of the 3 big sects, naturally knew the gravity of the situation, even at such a critical juncture. Most of them were still able to maintain their composure. The situation was not chaotic. Very soon, only the 3 experts and a dozen or so elders were left on the battlefield. In the battle just now, a few of the few remaining elders had already died. Reverend Daoxian's facial muscles twitched slightly, and then he did not look anymore, turned his head and stared at the great enemy in front of him. The enormous black wind pillar, under the control of an invisible strange force, descended from the sky. In the raging black air, the beast deity used cold eyes, seemed to penetrate the world's slaughter, coldly looked over, met Reverend Daoxian's stern eyes. Reverend Daoxian's heart was slightly shaken. The beast deity in front of him, although his figure was like a human, but in his eyes, for some reason, there was not the slightest human emotion. In that cold gaze, it seemed to regard all living things in the world as animals without spirituality. The murderous intent was unusually strong, really like an extremely ferocious beast. It was also at this moment that the wind pillar descended from the sky and finally landed on the sea of clouds. Instantly, the extremely hard white jade floor let out a muffled sound when the wind pillar landed on it. In an instant, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the white jade floor, and a large amount of sand, stones, and boulders were actually shaken and sent flying upwards. And in the wind pillar, there was a hissing sound, like the low roar of evil spirits, and also like the shrill cry of evil spirits. As if they had heard some strange summons, suddenly the 6 huge demonic beast skeletons that the good faction had expended all their efforts to eliminate actually moved again. The good faction people's countenance changed. Right now, the heaven and earth were without light. A mournful scene, dense ghostly energy rolled over. Those 6 huge skeletons, one by one, staggered and moved, although not very agile, but they were attracted by the strange force, dragged their huge bodies, scratched out deep trenches on the ground, sucked into the enormous wind pillar. One after another, until finally the white-boned demonic snake's huge skeleton was completely sucked into the black wind pillar, disappeared without a trace. Following which, like a shrill cry from the 9 netherworld, a gust of evil energy rose from the sky in the raging wind. Above the clouds, the beast deity was expressionless, stepped on the enlarged Tautai, like a gust of wind and lightning charged into the wind pillar. The stench of blood, thick, wafted over. Even the numerous demonic beasts at the foot quietened down. Most of them crouched on the ground, did not even dare to breathe loudly, and some of the weaker ones buried their heads and trembled, so frightened that they could not control themselves. Suddenly, the wind stopped, the clouds calmed, heaven and earth also became quiet. Then, the crowd, like the numerous demonic beasts, held their breaths, dumbfoundedly stared at the dispersing of the clouds, revealing the monster in the world. Above the sea of clouds, a brand new and unimaginable monster towered, the size of its body, 3 times taller than the original 6 huge demonic beasts. The crowd and the ordinary demonic beasts in front of this monster were as insignificant as ants. The stench of blood constantly emanated from this monster, and even from its body, blood kept oozing out. Eerie white bones could be seen everywhere. Looking at the huge skeleton, it made one understand very quickly. This was the horrible evil spirit that was pieced together from the bodies of the 6 huge demonic beasts. And standing on the head of this huge monster was that beast deity young man. His face now looked slightly pale, but in his eyes, the thick murderous intention seemed to be raging even more. The huge, hideous white skull slowly shook, at the same time, making strange sounds. The 2 empty eye sockets, but there seemed to be another kind of invisible, ferocious glint, viciously staring at those people in front of it. A foul stench assaulted their nostrils. This reborn evil spirit seemed to be restless from head to toe as it growled in a low voice. And other than that, above the vast sea of clouds, there was not a single sound. Countless people were holding their breaths and watching. Reverend Daoxian in front of the crowd, his dark green Taoist robe fluttering in the wind, his face solemn. After countless people recovered from their shock, some people near and some far away quietly looked at him. However, on that immortal-like face, there was no expression. No one knew what he was feeling at this moment. The huge evil spirit monster gave a low growl. Suddenly, the white bones all over its body made an ear-piercing sound. The huge body slowly moved, walked forward. With each step, the ground seemed to be unable to withstand the pressure. Deeply sunk in, the stench of blood wafted in all directions. Rumble, rumble, rumble. This terrible thing walked very slowly, but each step seemed to land on the good faction people's hearts. Countless people stared blankly at that pile of horrifying white bones like a mountain slowly approaching. Even Xiao Ikai, this kind of people, also turned pale. That evil spirit was about to reach them. The white bones like a mountain. Reverend Daoxian, in a deep voice, said, "Fellow brothers, follow me." His words had just finished. The three good faction leaders transformed into 3 rays of light, took the lead, and flew up, followed by a dozen rays of different colored lights, flying towards that evil spirit. And on the huge evil spirit's head, that mysterious young man's face was indifferent. His eyes slowly reflected those strange lights that were flying over. Between heaven and earth, there was a sudden silence, like a suffocating feeling. Looking at the good faction rays of light streaking across the horizon, about to land, the beast deity's pupils suddenly contracted. He did not seem to make any movement, but the huge evil spirit below his feet abruptly raised its huge, hideous head, opened its bloody mouth, roared to the sky. The sound shook the wilderness. The numerous demon beasts behind it immediately wailed. Following this roar, the huge evil spirit did not leave the ground, directly opened its mouth and bit towards those rays of light charging over. Looking from afar, that ferocious mouth looked like it could swallow all of the good faction people in one mouthful. However, these people were all experts among the experts of the righteous path, the elites of the elites. Even in the entire world, they were all top figures of the righteous path, evil path, demon path, and shaman path. Their cultivation was so high that they could not be underestimated. Sure enough, even though the evil spirit was ferocious and aggressive, the fine lights that were rushing down from the sky dispersed at the same time and flew in different directions. In a blink of an eye, the real bodies of the elders appeared in midair. For a moment, everyone shouted. Magical weapons lit up and attacked the evil spirit from different directions. And above the clouds, Reverend Daoxian, Puhong Master, and Yun Elon, the 3 of them appeared. Yun Elon was the first to make a move. His left hand brushed the air. A fiery light appeared in his hand, like a pure young jade, born in the air, like amber. It was Funxiang Valley Inferno skill which had reached the pinnacle. That flame was like a solid object, looked small, burning in Yun Elon's hand. His palm turned over, his face solemn. Both of his hands danced, like a meteor shuttling across the horizon. That pure fire flame left his body, seemed to be spinning slowly in the air, seemed slow but was actually fast, flew towards that evil spirit. Right now, the dozens of elders beside him had all brandished their magical weapons, struck towards this terrible evil spirit. On a huge white skeletal body, was constantly hit by the rays of light. Just that this demon was hit by the magical weapons of these people with profound magical powers. Although its body trembled under the magical power that would normally make an ordinary person's soul fly and scatter, it was actually as if nothing had happened. It was just that it let out shrill cries again and again, obviously uncomfortable. Moreover, it looked more and more furious, roaring fiercely. Right now, in the air, Yin Elon's flame emitted an amber light, small but concentrated and did not disperse, flew towards that monster. For some reason, although the huge evil spirit was fearless against the surrounding magical weapons, but facing this small flame, it seemed to have some misgivings. Its body seemed to shrink back a little, but this body was too huge. How could it avoid it? In a short while, this little flame landed beside the evil spirit's mouth. On the eerie white bones touched down. See, amidst the countless booms and chaotic noises, that inconspicuous little voice, the little amber-like flame, actually forcibly burned into the hard white bone that was as strong as a mountain, leaving a deep burnt yellow hole on the white bone. And that little flame also disappeared into the deep hole. Everyone was stunned, held their breath, and looked at each other. After a while, suddenly, a huge roar exploded from the depths of the white bones, like an erupting volcano, was suddenly born in the depths of the evil spirit's white bones body. The blazing heat wave instantly spread out. The originally white bones impressively had half of their bodies roasted into a withered yellow color. A scarlet flame more than 10 feet thick abruptly exploded out from the white bones, soaring into the sky. Even the Qingyin disciples in the distance felt the unbearable heat, not to mention the monster that was burning in the scarlet flames. For a moment, the good faction cheered thunderously. The good faction 3 leaders' methods were really incomparable to others. Like a volcanic eruption, the incomparably arrogant hot flames gradually dispersed, and a strange monster that was enveloped by the intense flames slowly revealed itself. Half of its body had been roasted into a charred black color. Although it looked even more strange and terrifying, its appearance was much more miserable than before, and there was no longer a trace of its vicious appearance. The good faction people who were initially shocked by the monster's appearance all relaxed, heaved a long sigh of relief. Thinking about it, it made sense with Reverend Daoxian and the rest of these highly skilled, celestial-like figures around. What demons and ghosts would they be afraid of? Just that, for some reason, compared to those jubilant young disciples, the three good faction leaders above the clouds strangely darkened their expressions. Chapter 3:23. Looking at the heavily injured evil spirit, it seemed to be in a sorry state. Half of its body was gloomy white, the other half was charred black. It looked rather strange and even comical. Just then in the distant good faction disciple sneers, this huge, terrible, evil spirit slowly lifted its head, suddenly made a roar. Its huge head opened its mouth. A gust of black air like a whirlwind spurted out from it, straight towards the three in the air. Reverend Daoxian and the rest were highly cultivated. Naturally, they would not be tricked. Their bodies rose several zhangs. At the same time, their bodies were surrounded by green, gold, red, three brilliant lights. But even so, that gust of black air above the sea of clouds and the strong wind did not dissipate. A strange stench could be detected from afar, clearly extremely poisonous. At the same time, the beast deity expressionlessly waved his hands. His posture was strange. His movements were simple and unadorned, as if it was the ancient times before civilization, the movements of those ancient people when they worshipped the heaven. Along with his movements, there seemed to be an invisible and strange power rolling over. The dark clouds in the sky once again gathered and became as thick as ink. Between the wind and the clouds, there were even strange flashes of lightning, illuminating the layers of darkness a little. The people on the ground for a moment were in awe, not knowing what kind of sorcery it was, just that ever since this beast deity appeared, the strange sorcery it had displayed were all vast, shocking. Everyone's hearts were secretly fearful. And in the air, Reverend Daoxian frowned tightly, suddenly waved his hand, ordered all the elders to retreat. The dark clouds hung low, pressed very low. Finally, someone discovered something was wrong, cried out, and then, in everyone's shocked stares, that sky full of dark clouds stacked, lower and lower, finally from the nine heavens high, descended to the mortal world, on this sea of clouds, swallowing the beast deity and that huge evil spirit. The dark clouds covered an area of several zhangs. The good faction people retreated, and those demon beasts who were above the sea of clouds were shrouded in it. Reverend Daoxian and the other two landed, hovering in the air 10 zhangs away from the dark clouds, their faces solemn, staring intently at that surging dark clouds. At this moment, the sea of clouds square once again fell into a strange silence. However, this silence could not last for long. The rolling speed of the black cloud became faster and faster. Even the people standing far away could feel the surging demonic power within it. Finally, that enormous mass of black gas, facing Reverend Daoxian's direction, slowly opened a small opening. There was not a single bit of light, as if it was eternal darkness. That pitch-black hole coldly faced the front, and the surrounding clouds suddenly began to spin crazily, spiraling towards this small hole. And this small hole endlessly swallowed all the black gas that was pouring in, slowly began to expand, from an inch to a foot, from a foot to 10 feet. In a short period of time, the most terrifying, ferocious beast appeared in front of the three righteous path leaders. From the deepest part of the darkness, an arrogant and mournful roar resounded. Instantly, all of the dark clouds shook and danced together. The entire enormous Tongtian peak shook. The terrifying figure had already turned into blood, flew out from that deep dark hole, like a huge beast roaring to the sky, pounced towards Reverend Daoxian and the rest. Everyone's countenance changed. That young beast deity, standing at the top of the storm, howled to the sky, his clothes fluttering madly in a violent wind. Accompanying it was the furious roars of the huge evil spirit below his feet, far surpassed him, like a mountain pressing down. The momentum was so great, it was unparalleled in the world. Just that in this short period of time, in the eyes of Reverend Daoxian, Puhong Master, and Yun Elon, these three worlds' top cultivators, They could already see that this evil spirit was bathed in blood, ferocious and terrifying, but the most crucial thing was that its demonic power was soaring. The damage caused by Yun Elon's pure fire had long disappeared. Instead, it was even worse. And right now the dark clouds had dispersed. Indistinctly one could see behind this evil spirit. In the dark clouds, the demon beast corpses piled up like a mountain, all like withered leaves, lying on the ground. Right now, the enormous figure bared its fangs and brandished its claws, covering the entire sky. The shadow instantly shrouded the three experts. Reverend Daoxian's face was solemn, was about to make a move. Suddenly, Puhong Master beside him softly chanted, said, "Two brothers, please step back." After speaking, Puhong Master drifted 2 steps forward, facing that enormous shadow pouncing down from the sky. Looking from afar, Puhong Master looked as tiny as an ant. A golden light suddenly emitted from his hands. In this world filled with dark clouds and vicious atmosphere, it was as dazzling as the sun. That enlightened monk, his face faintly revealed benevolence, both hands clasped together, but from his palms, golden light abruptly bloomed, from small to large, instantly resplendent, shot out thousands of golden lights, charging straight to the clouds. Amidst the golden light, a magic weapon that looked like a golden disc slowly rose up. The golden light was brilliant, and the whole body was golden yellow. It was a square foot in diameter, and its edge was engraved with the golden body Dharma form of Arhat. It surrounded the center, which was the Dharma form of Gautama Buddha, with one palm put together, mercifully saving all living beings. Far away, numerous people almost at the same time exclaimed, "Great compassion, golden wheel." This Buddhist treasure had just appeared. The golden light immediately became even more resplendent. With Puhong Master's power alone, this golden light screen was not inferior to the light screen made by the 100 Good Faction disciples. And in the golden light screen, various Buddhist incantations appeared and disappeared. Wherever illuminated, it was solemn and benevolent, in stark contrast with the vicious atmosphere ahead. However, even though it was facing this rare Buddhist treasure, the evil spirit beast that leaped out from the depths of the dark clouds, filled with murderous intent, under the beast deity's urging, did not show the slightest intention of retreating, still descended from the sky, pounced down with a loud bang, and crashed head first into the golden light. Unexpectedly, when the huge shadow collided with the incomparably brilliant golden light, there was no sound at all. There was no earth-shattering scene, as expected. The golden light that filled the sky suddenly turned around and surrounded it from all directions. The black gas that originally filled the sky suddenly shrunk and gradually shrank, but it still flew forward. In the end, the huge figure of the evil spirit was compressed to less than 1/10 of its original size. However, that black gas that was still shooting out became even thicker. The vicious atmosphere did not diminish, but instead increased. In the indistinct roars, this black arrow streaked across the sky, broke through numerous golden barriers, charged to Puhong Master. The eerie cold air, the ferocious face, as if right in front of him, in that deepest darkness. Puhong Master closed his eyes and clasped his palms together. His mouth softly chanted Buddhist incantations, light and quick, like a song yet not a song, like a speech yet not a speech. That was slowly rotating in the air, emitting thousands of golden lights. Great compassion golden wheel descended from the top of the head, landed in front of Puhong, Buddha's real body, and various Arhat's Dharma. Together faced this ruthless evil thing that had never been seen since ancient times. In the golden light, the Buddha's faces seemed benevolent, seemed austere. Benevolent was pitying all living things in the world. Austere was subduing evil, ferocious slaughter. Who knew which side was the Buddha's true face? The low chanting, from small to large, instantly resounded through the heaven and earth. The brilliant golden light shot out, making one unable to look at it, like the Buddha's flame burning everything, swallowing all of the black in front. A huge golden ball of light rose in the air. Such a spectacular scene was really rare in the world. The crowd above the sea of clouds were all shaken, stunned by the Buddha's unparalleled power. However, while everyone was dumbstruck, that strange black that seemed to have been awed by the unparalleled Buddha's power suddenly flashed out tenaciously from the golden light, in the resplendent splendor, like a thin black needle, pierced onto the Great Compassion golden wheel. On the Buddha's supreme treasure golden wheel, the benevolent Buddha's face, in that instant, strangely flashed past a streak of black. Almost at the same time, the solemn chanting suddenly stopped. The noisy heaven and earth immediately strangely quietened down. Everyone's eyes immediately gathered on the two figures in the golden light. On Puhong Master's face, a trace of pain flashed past, and that wisp of black gas, like it was reborn, from the original thin thread shape, swiftly enlarged, gradually taking shape, revealing the beast deity figure. Chapter 3:24. The black gas gradually rose. The good faction people's countenance changed. Looking from afar, the beast deity's face still did not have any expression. Even his eyes were still cold. Right now on the golden wheel, a strange black color started to appear on the Buddha statue's face, getting darker and darker, and the originally compassionate and peaceful statue's face also became ruthless, more and more ferocious. Puhong Master's countenance changed greatly. His face darkened. With a low roar, his monk robe fluttered without wind. His figure instantly expanded. As if it was agitated, the golden lights in the sky suddenly turned around, emitting a sharp whistling sound, swiftly returned to Puhong Master, swiftly condensing into a golden ball of light, about the size of a palm, golden light scurrying, like the sun in the sky. The Buddha's power surging in it could be felt from far away. In the sky, solemn Sanskrit chants sounded again. The golden ball of light glimmered with dazzling brilliance, slowly pushed forward. Under the urging of this solemn and dignified Buddhist power, the black gas on the Buddha statue's face gradually dissipated, started to return to normal. And the beast deity seemed to sense something. His countenance changed slightly. Seeing that the golden light ball had finally collided with the golden wheel of great compassion, suddenly, the golden light converged, and the entire magical weapon golden wheel seemed to become transparent, as if a ray of light had finally bloomed. The flowing Buddha's power was like a volcano that had been brewing for a long time, with countless golden and dazzling Buddhist mantras spurting out. In that instant, the entire sky turned into a golden ocean. The golden light flooded over. No other colors could be seen. In this splendid ocean of light, it seemed like there were no demons that could survive, except for that faintly discernible finger. In the world that was engulfed by the boundless Buddha light, there was a wisp of black gas in the depths of the golden light. It was as fine as smoke and dust, and it floated up, appearing and disappearing from time to time. It hovered in front of the golden wheel of great compassion and gently touched the Buddha's face, in between the eyebrows of his kind and merciful face. That bit, like a grain in the vast ocean, like a mustard seed in Mount Sumeru, compared to the Buddhist light in the sky, so insignificant. But Puhong Master's face immediately changed, his entire face dimmed like dead ash. As a result, everyone saw that in the midst of the brilliance, heaven and earth suddenly shook and the Buddhist light fluctuated. The monk who looked like an immortal spat out a large mouthful of blood, dyeing the magic treasure golden wheel in front of him red. The violent wind quietly stopped and the chaotic world quieted down. The golden light gently dissipated in the swaying and drifting. Puhong Master's lips trembled slightly. His body also seemed to stagger, retreating backwards. Fa Xiang and the rest had already rushed up, supported him. Puhong Master smiled bitterly, facing the void in front, put his palms together and said, "Patron power is strong. It is really something that I have never seen in my life. Respect, respect." On Mount Qingyun's Tongtian Peak, countless righteous disciples were in an uproar. In the mid-air, the golden light dissipated, the black energy regenerated, as if leaping out from the void, a sharp howl. That enormous evil beast suddenly reappeared. They really did not know why such an enormous body. In that intense battle, why was it not seen, and now it actually reborn alive? And on its head, that figure who made the world's good faction shocked, turned paler and paler. For the first time his indifferent face showed signs of tiredness. Only his eyes were still as cold as usual. But when his eyes saw Puhong Master's figure, he was still slightly moved, coldly snorted. The cultivation arts of the Central Plains are indeed extraordinary. Puhong Master shook his head slightly, intended to persuade him, but looking at the other party, he knew it would be useless. With the support of Fa Xiang and the rest, he retreated. Among the three good faction leaders, Right now, there were already two who had suffered a loss under this mysterious and strange evil man. For a moment, Tong Tian Peak, everyone's countenance changed. And over at the demon beast's side, thousands of beasts roared at the same time, their morale soaring. And at this moment, a roar charged up to the sky from behind the crowd, under Tong Tian Peak Crystal Palace. In the icy cold pool water, an enormous whirlpool suddenly appeared. The water spun rapidly, the faster it spun. That roar like a dragon's cry and tiger's roar also became louder and louder, actually forcefully suppressing those innumerable demon beast voices. But in the cold ice pond, the water column, like spurring, with a loud rumble, flew up in a perfectly straight line towards the sky, straight to the height of several zhongs. The water column condensed and did not disperse like a wildflower blooming. Qingyin Town's mountain divine beast venerable water Qilin's enormous body appeared. The Qingyin disciples on Tongtian Peak were first shocked and then ecstatically shouted loudly, their spirits greatly roused. Water Unicorn, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, raised its head to the sky and gave a long howl, shook its head and tail, left the water column and flew forward, landed on the clouds. The water column that shot up to the sky then came crashing down, immediately rumbling like a mountain torrent, splashing the surroundings of the cold ice pond wet and cold. The good faction disciples who could not dodge in time hid everywhere. For a moment, it was quite embarrassing. But most of the people, at this moment, could not care so much. Their eyes were all looking up at the sky. Water Unicorn's eyes glared angrily, roared incessantly, stood in the air, and a dark green figure slowly landed on top of Water Unicorn, facing ahead, that seemingly undefeatable beast deity. Reverend Daoxian. The beast deity's cold face still did not change, his eyes facing Reverend Daoxian across the air. Instead, the enormous evil spirit at his feet facing Water Unicorn similarly roared sternly, and Water Unicorn obviously did not have the slightest favorable impression of this kind of evil spirit, looked even more ferocious, bared its fangs, roared again and again. In the roar, Water Unicorn abruptly lifted its head, faint green light flashed, spat out a long sword that looked like stone yet not stone, flew up into the air. Reverend Daoxian stretched out his right hand and caught it. In that instant, suddenly, the entire Qingyun Hill quieted down, and the next moment, an earth-shaking roar like tide burst out. Zhu Xian Ancient Sword. The legendary, unparalleled, indestructible Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, the good faction supreme, celestial weapon to subdue evil, finally after 10 years, once again reappeared in the world. A beam of light from that legendary ancient sword, like gentle water quietly flowing, transmitted to Reverend Daoxian's body. In the numerous cheers and shouts, Reverend Daoxian's body had just held the sword hilt. For some reason, his body instead trembled slightly, and then he once again exerted strength, steadily, heavily, grabbed Zhu Xian Ancient Sword in his hand. Heaven-bestowed celestial sword, slay the evil spirit. Reverend Daoxian's face was as usual, his expression calm, just as he held Zhu Xian, raised the sword and pointed it at the beast deity, spoke indifferently. In the eyes of the numerous people, he was already like an inviolable celestial. Under the Zhu Xian sword, the numerous people cheered together. And before the celestial sword, the beast deity looked at that ancient sword for a long time, and then carefully looked at Reverend Daoxian. Suddenly his cold face changed. He shook his head in disbelief and laughed, his laughter loud and clear, reverberating in this heaven and earth, occasionally mixed with a few low coughs. Good sword, good sword. The beast deity clapped his hands in admiration, but in his tone there was a tinge of mockery. Such a tyrannical and supreme sword, even I fear it. To think that it would appear in your hands, it is really, ha ha. He did not continue. Instead, as if he had seen the funniest thing in his life, uncontrollably laughed out loud, making everyone baffled. Looking at that savage figure, Reverend Daoxian's expression did not change, did not speak to explain, only inhaled deeply. Both of his eyes closed and then opened. His eyes glinted. Instantly, a dazzling light from the Zhu Xian ancient sword blossomed. The Water Unicorn howled to the sky. The beast deity's laughter abruptly stopped. His face revealed a solemn expression, facing ahead. As for the people below, they all held their breaths. Everyone knew that the battle between the two of them was already the final battle. The final outcome of this catastrophe would eventually arrive. Chapter 325. Outside the ancient forbidden grounds, birds chirped and the mountains were quiet. Other than the indistinct battle cries coming from the distant peaks, there were no other noises. A gentle mountain breeze gently blew over from afar. The entire mountain of Vern swayed, as if it was not a scene of the human world. Illusory moon cave, under those four bold words, the simple and unadorned stone walls outside the cave looked to have peeled off a lot, as if recording the endless years quietly flowing past here. And right now, this stretch of wilderness also seemed to be silent, watching the two men silently confronting each other. How many years of time seemed to have quietly passed like this? Looking back, old friends, how many were left? Lin Jingyu had been silent all along, but the expression on his face at the same time kept changing violently. Only his eyes had never left Ghost Li's figure. That man who was silently standing in front of him, was he really that Zhang Xiaofan? Finally, he spoke, his voice deep and slightly hoarse, said, "Why did you want to kill him? He is only an old man with one foot in the grave." The muscles on Ghost Li's face seemed to twitch. He looked up at Lin Jingyu, that childhood playmate, veins faintly pulsating on his face. It could be seen that he was trying his best to control his emotions, but that unyielding expression, it was as if he was born with it. Just like when he was young, he was already familiar with it. But now he was standing there in broad daylight, standing under the sun, questioning her. Deep in the dense forest, there seemed to be a pair of dim eyes, coldly watching the two men. Ghostly stared at him for a long time, slowly said, "He blocked my way." Lin Jingyu snorted, and then he looked up at the sky, breathed deeply, as if speaking to himself. The next moment, when he turned back, his expression was already cold. He looked deeply at Ghost Li, looked at this once incomparably familiar, but right now seemed so strange, coldly said, "Ever since the Grass Temple Village disaster, only the two of us survived. I've always treated you as my brother. Do you know?" Ghost Li's mouth twitched as he slowly nodded. Lin Jingyu stared at him, said, "In my heart, I've always thought that both of us are the closest people. So even when you betrayed Qing Yin 10 years ago, I always had hope in my heart, hoping that one day you would be able to mend your ways and return to the right path." For the first time, his face showed a gloomy expression, but this disappointment also revealed hatred. He sneered, "But I am still wrong. I should have known. You're no longer my best brother Sha Danan. You are now the Falcon's Brood, the merciless Ghost Li." He smiled bitterly. The expression on his face became even more determined. A dragon's roar was heard. The jade green light flourished. The dragon slayer sword was unsheathed. The sword's aura was like a dragon, surging and surging, as if it wanted to devour someone. Contrasting with Lin Jingyu's young but angry face, it seemed somewhat sinister. "The friendship between us shall be severed today." The sonorous words, like a resolute voice. Following that, a jade-green sword aura tore through the silence, sweeping across the hard stones on the ground with a loud bang. It lasted for a long time. After the hubbub, what was left was between the two of them, a deep sword mark on the flagstones. Ghost Li's countenance suddenly changed. Even his body, for some reason, trembled slightly. He stared intently at that deep mark on the ground. For the first time, an unconcealable trace of pain appeared on his face. That sword mark was so deep, embedded in the hard stones, unable to be erased. He stared at that mark, to the extent that even Lin Jingyu's words, he seemed to have overlooked it. The deep sword mark, once upon a time, it seemed to be familiar, as if when there was also a person whom he cherished in his heart, like this, so resolute and resolute. Deep mark, cut the flagstones beneath his feet, severed the friendship in the world, hurt. Whose heart was it? As if unable to breathe, Ghost Li involuntarily panted heavily. Even his body started to tremble uncontrollably, but the next moment, he once again controlled himself. The agitated expression flashed past his face, never to appear again. He slowly lowered his head, without anyone noticing, quietly clenched his teeth. Then, he raised his head, looked at Lin Jingyu for a long time, both his hands clenched into fists, even his nails dug deep into his palms. But on his face, he was smiling. Lin Jingyu became even more enraged, said, "What are you smiling at?" Ghost Li watched him for a long time, softly said, repenting from the wrong path? He suddenly laughed loudly. His laughter mournful, said, I am lost. I am unable to find the path, but what path is the right path? Your path. Lin Jingyu sternly said, That's right, the right path is the right path. You have betrayed the right path. You have fallen into the wrong path. Pei! Lin Jingyu's body shook, was stunned. Ghostly's countenance was miserable, looked up at the sky, angrily said, Who said the right path is the right path? Did you say it? Even if what you said is the right path, on what basis does Qing Yun have to be the right path? Lin Jingyu frowned tightly, his face revealing murderous intent, coldly said, Since you and I have already severed all ties, why the need to say more? Ghostly coldly looked over, said, You want to kill me? Lin Jingyu sternly said, That old man who died in your hands for the past 10 years taught me attentively, treated me like a son, my debt of gratitude as heavy as a mountain, just like my father. He died in your hands, and you are still unrepentant. So I want to get rid of this evil for the people, to avenge him. Ghostly coldly laughed, said, There are many jackals and wolves in this world. There is no meaning to it. Just that my wish has not been fulfilled, I definitely cannot die. Lin Jingyu let out a long laugh, full of disdain. The dragon slayer sword light sword and lit up. He coldly said, Less nonsense. The grudge between you and me for these 10 over years. Let us settle it today. Ghostly snorted. His right hand glowed with faint green light. The fire stick glimmered with black light. Quietly flew up. Birds chirped softly. The mountain was even more serene. The mountain was covered in verdant green. The cool breeze blew gently under the boundless blue sky. Before the 1,000-year-old ancient cave, the two childhood friends coldly faced each other, about to have a life and death battle. And at this moment, suddenly, from behind the two of them, from that illusory moon cave, a deep rumble was heard. The surrounding boundary started to tremble. Both of their expressions changed. Before they could react, a purple aura flashed in the 1,000-year-old cave. In the blink of an eye, the purple aura rose and enveloped the cave. Clouds surged, and there was a thunderous sound. The purple aura was like a pillar, and its momentum was endless. It shot up into the sky, leaving only the two in front of this heaven and earth wonder. Right now looked extremely insignificant, their clothes fluttering, again coldly faced each other. The wind was whistling. Tongtian Peak, solemn and solemn. Not only the good faction side was silent, even those black masses of demon beasts seemed to feel something, one by one quietened down, quietly looked up at the sky. Standing on the huge head of the white-boned, evil creature, the beast deity's bright-colored silk clothes gently fluttered in the wind. A youthful face, but in his eyes, unknown how many hardships he had experienced, was also looking at that gradually forming grand sword formation in the sky. The majestic purple energy first rose from Qing Yun Hill Tongtian Peak rear mountain. Its speed like lightning, its power unparalleled, charged up to the sky, like an enormous purple pillar supporting the heaven and earth, suddenly appeared in this boundless world. The purple energy seethed, surged and flowed, broke through the air, and finally landed on that stone like Zhuxian ancient sword. The next moment, Zhuxian ancient sword lit up. Even though it was far away, countless of human beings could still feel that high up in the sky. In that ancient sword, something seemed to be stirred, slowly waking up from its long slumber. On the Zhuxian ancient sword, brilliant light blossomed, illuminating Reverend Daoxian's face. His dark green Taoist robe billowed without wind, making fluttering sounds, his right hand holding the sword, his face solemn, his left hand tightly gripping the sword formula. Between heaven and earth, his low voice was heard, like Sanskrit chanting, like a strange incantation, reverberating far away. Suddenly, his left hand waved the sword formula, straight towards the horizon. Almost at the same time, at the other 6 towering peaks of Qing Yun Hill Range, 6 colored lights rose up at the same time, like long rainbows piercing through the horizon, breaking through the air, drawing a long trajectory in the firmament. Finally all landed on that Zhuxian ancient sword. Instantly, Zhuxian ancient sword was engulfed by the dazzling brilliance, like the rising sun falling into the mortal world, unable to be looked at. Resplendent light burst out from the ancient sword, immediately dispersing the black gas which was spiraling in the horizon. In the intense light, the 7 colored lights merged into one, rose up in that dazzling ball of white light. In the sky, transformed into an enormous 7-colored huge sword, flowing with extraordinary splendor, rainbow-colored lights flashing. Following which, that enormous colorful main sword, under the continuous infusion of spiritual energy from the 7 peaks, started to gradually enlarge, and in the process of enlarging, it separated into various small single-colored swords, more and more densely packed and distributed in the sky. On the ground, a burst of cheers erupted from the crowd. Countless young disciples, regardless if they were from Qing Yun's sect, all revealed expressions of reverence and worship, looked up at that almost mythical majestic sword formation in the horizon. And many of those who had experienced that Qing Yun turmoil 10 years ago, right now their emotions seemed to be rather complicated. Some were happy, some were silent. In the crowd, the surrounding young disciples were all beaming with joy. Lu Sueki silently looked up at that resplendent, imposing Zhu Xian sword formation, rays of lights, even reflected down from the sky, enveloping everyone including her, illuminating her face. Just that, on her cold, beautiful face, there was no expression, only a pair of bright eyes, reflecting the 7 colored lights, indistinctly, flickering with unusual emotions. But in the end, no one was able to see into her heart. 10 years' time turned out unwittingly, quietly passed like that. Who would still remember that heart-wrenching roar at Qingyun Hill? Who would still remember that young man who had sunk into despair? Lu Sueki's body trembled slightly, as if suddenly recalling something unbearable and moving. Even the expression on her face turned gloomy. Only subconsciously, her grip on Tianya, celestial sword, tightened even more. The sky full of sword images became denser and denser. Limitless fine lights covered the entire sky. The beast deity's eyes reflected the limitless sword images in the sky. After watching for a long while, nodded, his face solemn, sighed and said, "It is indeed uncanny workmanship. Didn't expect that Central Plains actually has such an unparalleled figure, able to gather the spiritual energy of the mountains, create this level of exceptional sword formation. It is really amazing." He clapped his hands and praised, said 3 times in succession, "Amazing, amazing, amazing." His mouth was full of praise, but there was no trace of fear on his face, or rather, no one knew. Like him, this kind of human yet not human, like ghost demon thing. Would there be any fear? In the wind and clouds, the enormous white bone demon made a deep roar, slowly rose and stood in the air, facing the water Qilin bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws, and Reverend Daoxian who was standing on its back. The violent wind blew past. The horizon was silent. The clamor of the crowd and demon beasts seemed to suddenly become far away. Only the 2 of them facing each other, the heaven and earth spacious but also seemed narrow, unable to accommodate the 2 of them. Both of them looked at each other. Reverend Daoxian coldly said, "Under Zhu Xian's sword, demons and evil spirits have never escaped alive. If you are smart, surrender now. Seclude yourself in Qingyun Hill for the rest of your life. I can spare your life." The beast deity was surprised and then laughed, ignored him, only shook his head slightly. His expression seemed to contain some mockery. Reverend Daoxian saw it and did not speak anymore. Inhaled deeply, his right hand holding the Zhu Xian ancient sword. His left hand suddenly waved. In the sky, full of innumerable energy swords, suddenly an orange energy sword separated from the Zhu Xian sword formation, emitted a sharp whistle, shot towards the beast deity. The beast deity's face was indifferent, but his eyes were staring intently at this incoming energy sword, watching this orange sword like lightning. In a blink of an eye, it was less than 1 zhang away. The beast deity suddenly raised his left hand, 5 fingers flat and spread out towards the direction of the energy sword. In the air, black gas appeared out of thin air. In the area 10 zhang in front of the beast deity, instantly condensed into a black shield wall, top and bottom pointed, forcibly blocking the orange sword. The next moment, the orange energy sword struck onto the black shield. Heaven and earth, in that instant, was still silent. Rumble. Following which, like the rising sun leaping out of the water, the beginning of heaven and earth, thunder roared, a deafening roar instantly burst out, and in the black gas and orange light, a few electric lights flashed a few times, then slowly subsided. These two things, which were originally formless energy, like the world's hardest treasures, collided with each other, the entire firmament of heaven and earth shrouded in the deafening roar. The formless sound waves, along with the strong wind, brushed past Qingyun Hill Peak. Everyone's ears buzzed, their faces turned pale. Even though everyone knew that the two of them were people with extremely high Taoist techniques, the moment they exchanged blows, what looked like an ordinary probing battle actually had such great power. It was truly unexpected. At the same time, the final outcome of this battle was even more unfathomable. Even some of them had already faintly thought, after this catastrophe, under such an intense battle, Qingyun Hill, what would it be like again? In the air, Reverend Daoxian and the beast deity looked at each other, both expressionless. Not a trace of surprise could be seen. Under the brilliant, colorful energy, swords that filled the sky, the black gas that shrouded the beast deity looked especially glaring. After a long time, Reverend Daoxian seemed to snort lightly. His left hand made a sword gesture, where his robe fluttered, contrasted with that dazzling ancient sword Zhu Xian flashing. But in the firmament, suddenly a gale arose, the sky filled with sword shadows. Almost half of the sky swayed with a loud bang in that instant. For a moment, the sky flowed with extraordinary splendor, extremely dazzling, almost unable to look directly at it. The beast deity's countenance changed, staring intently. As expected, after a short while, starting from behind Reverend Daoxian, several colorful energy swords had already turned around, trembling in the air, aimed at the beast deity. The icy cold energy, in a blink, surged up violently. Not long after, half of the energy swords of the air, looking at the number, seemed to be controlled by an invisible force, slowly turn around. Between heaven and earth, an austere atmosphere. But without waiting for them to be amazed, the ancient sword Zhu Xian in Reverend Daoxian's hand had already exploded with light, at the same time, like a raging tide bursting forth. Raging waves beating against the shore. In the Zhu Xian sword formation, hundreds of single-colored energy swords formed a 7 zhang long and wide enormous sword rain, pouncing down with a loud rumble. The sky was filled with sharp whistling sounds. The sounds reverberated through heaven and earth. The beast deity watched the sword rain covering the sky and covering the earth with a loud shout. The enormous evil spirits and evil creatures under his feet howled to the sky, their voices extremely mournful. But his hands opened and closed widely, his body swaying, his movements ancient and clumsy. Even at a distance, for some reason, everyone on Tongtian Peak heard an extremely strange, desolate song at the same time. That song was completely different from the Central Plains, desolate and vigorous, like a wild beast howling to the sky in a stormy night, with an unending desolate feeling. Following the deep ancient voice, accompanied by sonorous drumming sounds, the black energy around the beast deity suddenly soared, as black as ink, swiftly flowing in the gale, almost like a black dragon bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws, majestically looking down on the world. Chapter 3:26. In the blink of an eye, that sword rain which blotted out the sky and covered the earth had already reached the beast deity. The strong wind made his face hurt. And in this split second, the beast deity's figure suddenly disappeared in the masses of black gas. Instead, the evil spirit beast's black gas surged, leaped up with a loud bang. Its entire body's bones made cracking sounds, shrouded by the black gas. It looked even more terrifying. That evil spirit beast roared to the sky, exhaled. In that instant, the wind and clouds changed color. The ground beneath it was sand and stones flying, almost unable to stand. Amidst the wind and clouds, black chi surged and fused with the evil spirit monster. In an instant, it expanded more than 3 times its original size. Dozens of protruding black chi emerged from the evil spirit monster's white bones, dancing in the air like tentacles. By this time, the Zhu Xian sword rain had already flown over. How could the 1,000-year sword formation be taken lightly? The outer layer of the black gas surged up. Before it reached the front, it was instantly destroyed by the sword energy. Not even a trace was left. It forcefully charged down again, straight towards that hideous evil beast. The evil spirit continued to roar and howl. Seeing that this unstoppable rain of swords was about to hit the giant evil spirit's body, suddenly, the dozens of tentacle-like black gas suddenly flew up to meet the swords. The black gas covered the sky, blocking the path of the swords. Zhu Xian sword energy in a blink charged down, clashed with those strange black gas tentacles. Just that these black gas tentacles were not like the outer layer of black gas, unable to withstand a single blow, and also not like the shield that the beast deity controlled initially. The hundreds of Zhu Xian energy swords charged down, these tentacles like living things wrapped around them, not to mention slowing down. Even the light on the swords also slowly faded, gradually dimmed. But the Zhu Xian sword was after all not an ordinary object, although it was formed from formless energy. In order to resolve these energy swords, the surrounding black gas tentacles were still clearly injured by the sharp celestial energy. A lot of them evaporated, just that from that evil spirit's body, the black gas seemed to be gushing out unceasingly. In a blink replenished the damage. In a short while, these hundreds of heaven-shaking, earth-shattering, immortal-slaying chi swords were actually all dissolved into nothingness. Qing Yunhill Tong Tian Peak was dead silent, like a dead silence. In the air, Reverend Daoxian's expression was even more solemn, but there was no fear, his celestial-like figure towering in the clouds, his hand holding the resplendent Zhu Xian ancient sword, like an ancient celestial. But he smiled coldly, his right hand holding the sword pointed to the sky, slowly waving, accompanied by the ancient sword celestial slaying sword flashing dazzlingly. The sound of thunder faintly began to be heard in the sky, above the entire sky. Rumbling, the thousands of celestial slaying sword formation rotated together, especially that seven-colored main sword was even more dazzling. It was hard to look at. In the white light, from the ancient sword Zhu Xian, suddenly a stream of purple energy soared up to the horizon, straight into the Zhu Xian sword formation. Instantly within a radius of 10 zhongs, the purple energy swords gathered together, following which, the other 6 colors of light soared up one by one, glaring, flew into the horizon, instantly forming 7-star positions in the Zhu Xian sword formation, each a huge, single-colored sword formation, awe-inspiring. Out, the wind and clouds, the wind howled. In that silence, a sudden clap of thunder, with a loud rumble, like thousands of people's hearts trembling. The sword lights in the horizon flowed, colorful lights dazzling. Innumerable colorful energy, swords streaked across the horizon, sharp whistling down. Like the heavens' angry tide, surging over, the purple gas in the lead. Looking at it, one could not see the boundary. Compared to before, it was many times more powerful. And behind the purple gas, every 10 feet, a colored sword energy gathered and flew over, galloping and whistling, surging and surging. It was already beyond human imagination. Looking at this almost apocalyptic scene, everyone's countenance changed, their palms sweating. Mixed in the loud thunder and the sky full of sharp whistling sounds, the ancient song gradually faded. Even those strange drumming sounds had long disappeared. But that huge evil spirit, facing this terrible sword rain raging waves, brazenly did not retreat, but in the rising black gas, it even let out a long and stern howl, as if provoking the firmament, extremely unruly. In a blink, the sword lights pounced, several black gas tentacles immediately surged up. Even though this sword energy was not the same as before, but the southern barbaric ancient witchcraft actually had an unfathomable power. The black gas tentacles fought more and more valiant. Although in a blink of an eye it was pierced with thousands of holes by the innumerable energy swords, but the endless black gas in a blink of an eye filled up the holes. The largest range actually expanded as far as several feet. Just as the first wave of purple energy swords charged into the black gas, forcibly suppressed the black gas. But in a short moment, the black gas had already counterattacked, rose up, swallowing the energy swords one by one. Even so, without waiting for the black gas to return to its original state, the second wave of energy swords had already charged up. Thousands of images, endless sharp lights, in the firmament the sword lights like rain like locusts, densely packed, and following Reverend Daoxian's true way, the Zhu Xian ancient sword glimmered even more. The 7-colored main sword in the air continued to split out more and more single-colored energy swords, and the splitting speed became faster and faster, wave after wave forming a soul-stirring enormous sword formation. With a loud rumble, it struck down into that mass of black gas. Under the raging waves of the Zhu Xian sword formation, the black gas did not revert to its initial arrogant look. gradually from the initial several zhang range. It was gradually being suppressed smaller and smaller, and facing this wave of stronger and stronger, almost endless surging sword lights that made one despair. The black gas was also gradually unable to hold on. The huge evil spirit was still roaring incessantly, but the black gas around its body had gradually weakened. Each wave of sword rain was nearer to its body than the previous one. The black gas gradually thinned. The strange tentacles also gradually became powerless. Resisting the sky, full of swords rain, also became more and more strenuous. Not knowing when it started, after a long period of silence, the crowd below erupted into tide-like cheers. The last 6 black gas tentacles, after withstanding a wave of green sword lights, finally dissipated, turned into nothingness. In the air, only the huge evil spirit was left. Heaven and earth solemn, sword lights crisscrossed. Serene ancient song, boundless wilderness. Like thunder, like lightning, infinite sword lights descended from the sky, pounced from all directions, piercing through the huge evil spirit in the air. The huge white bones instantly cracked. Innumerable black blood splattered out. The evil spirit abruptly raised its head, made a heart-wrenching, lung-splitting long howl to the firmament. The wind dissipated and the clouds dispersed. The sword rain gradually stopped. Under the thousands of pairs of eyes, the evil spirit's huge body, every inch of its skin and bones, seemed to be trembling lightly. Looking over, the innumerable flickering small swords pierced into every place, from head to tail, from top to bottom. Not a single place was intact. The people on Tongtian Peak sucked in a breath of cold air. For some reason, there was an indistinct piercing feeling on their backs. Just that evil spirit seemed to still be alive. The huge head that was pierced with all kinds of Zhu Xian energy swords slowly turned over, looked at its body that was riddled with thousands of holes, and then slowly lowered its head. Its voice, for some reason, was no longer mournful and ferocious. Right now seemed to be very low, as if there was some reluctance and even more so some pain. The huge mouth opened and closed. 2 red lights flashed past its eyes, like a flame, burning with all its might, but in the end, it was extinguished and dissipated. The next moment, in the air, from the evil spirit's huge body, a loud sound suddenly burst forth, resounding through heaven and earth. Innumerable energy, swords flew backwards. Even the Zhu Xian sword formation in the sky was also in disorder. Following which, the once insufferably arrogant, huge, evil spirit, suddenly became extremely fragile. A gust of wind blew past. The indestructible skeleton body, like sand and stone, crumbled down. The white bones became sand, flesh and blood became stone, scattered with the wind. Everyone stared silently at the horizon. When victory was in sight, no one cheered, as if there was a layer of strange feeling shrouding everyone's hearts. In the sky, that once huge body was about to completely disperse with the wind. Suddenly a cry was heard from below, and then everyone cried out. Inside the strange beast's body, although the flesh and bones were all gone, but there was still a ball of black gas that did not disperse, slowly rotating in the air. After a moment, the evil spirit's body was finally completely destroyed, and that ball of black gas also slowly dispersed, revealing the scene within. Impressively, it was a young human figure. It was the beast deity who had suddenly disappeared. But the beast deity right now no longer looked as suave and composed as before, and looked extremely disheveled, especially the gorgeous silk clothes on him. Right now, for some reason, also became riddled with thousands of holes. When the strong wind blew in the sky, it all turned into ashes. In an instant, he was completely naked. However, there wasn't any fear or disappointment on his face. On the contrary, his eyes stared at the vast sword formation in front of him. Suddenly, he smiled and stretched his body. He stood in midair and clapped his hands. Amazing, amazing. Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed. Clearly, he did not expect the beast deity to be so difficult to deal with. Facing such a formation, he was still able to withstand it. And at a glance, this person only looked paler, his tiredness more intense. Looking at his body, there was not even a single wound. Below, a sudden uproar. Qing Yun Hill female disciples at this moment came to their senses, their faces flushed red, not daring to look at the sky. Instead, in the sky, Although the beast deity was naked, he did not seem to care, as if it was like this since the beginning of heaven and earth, as if nothing had happened, only staring intently at that ancient sword Zhu Xian in Reverend Daoxian's hand. Reverend Daoxian sneered, said, "If you surrender now, promise to cripple your own skills and recultivate in this Qing Yun Hill illusory moon cave, I can spare your life. Otherwise, under the Zhu Xian sword, it will not spare the life of a savage like you." After speaking, he held Zhu Xian's sword, gently waved. Immediately the sky full of sword rays, as if responding, swayed together, awe-inspiring. But at this moment, Reverend Daoxian, suddenly a trace of pain flashed past his face. Although it was just a flash, but it was already seen by the beast deity. Chapter 327. The beast deity hovered in the air, his eyes shining brightly, his lips curled into a smile, faintly said, "Such a ferocious celestial sword, plus the spiritual energy of the green mountains below, you are actually able to hold on till now, without showing signs of weakening. You are really extraordinary." Reverend Daoxian frowned, in a deep voice said, "What do you mean by that?" The beast deity smiled, but did not answer, only shook his head and said, "The ancient sword spirit must be born from heaven and earth's evil energy, from the same source as me. How would I not know? You forcefully rode the sword to fight with me. The outcome is unknown, but most likely you were taken advantage of by the sword energy, this kind of harming others and yourself. You are not an ordinary person. Why do you need me to say more?" He, the beast deity, coldly laughed and said, "I advise you to abandon the sword as soon as possible. If not, in the future the sword spirit will bite back. I'm afraid your outcome will be 1,000 times worse than mine." Reverend Daoxian stared at the beast deity for a long time, suddenly shook his head and laughed, his eyes full of disdain, said, "Evil heretic way, how would you understand our Taoist benevolence? Moreover, our Taoist true way, the supreme celestial sword, how would it be understood by your wild words?" He made a clear whistle, waved his arm. The sky full of sword energy trembled, sternly said, "Evildoer, prepare to die." The beast deity coldly laughed, his eyes flashing like flames, enthusiastically said, "Good. Today I will let you experience the power of our southern border witchcraft." His words had just landed. Black energy had already formed from his naked skin. A black energy suddenly flashed. The next moment, the originally fair skin had turned completely black like ink, and under the skin, it started to tremble. Numerous little protrusions, as if alive, started to tremble nonstop. In the distant unknown land, in a vast wilderness in all directions, an extremely low and deep dong-dong sound suddenly resounded. It was like the heartbeat of a human, and it was peerlessly strange. And looking at the horizon, outside the Zhu Xian sword formation, the skies suddenly dimmed. Dark clouds rushed in from all directions, swiftly gathered beside the beast deity. Reverend Daoxian's face was solemn, his whole body on alert, staring at the strange changes in front. In the black gas lingering, the deep strange sounds that seemed to come from the netherworld became faster and faster, denser and denser, making one could not help but feel that their heartbeat was also speeding up, faster and faster, until it seemed like it was going to burst open. A few of the weaker good faction disciples could not withstand it and could only sit on the ground, circulating their skills to resist. And in the air, as the black gas became thicker, suddenly a deep roar, like a ferocious beast growling, and also like a strange insect breaking out of a cocoon, everyone clearly saw on the beast deity's black body. The skin on the left arm split open, and the countless of throbbing little protrusions slowly stretched out another thing. With fingers and fingers, it looked like another arm. And this new arm, the bones were strong, far bigger than the original arm. It was impossible to imagine how it stretched out from the original arm. But this was just the beginning. Following a series of deep exploding sounds, the beast deity's body seemed to split open, and from it, all kinds of new huge body parts were born. And not long after, on these new body parts, again split open, new even bigger body parts were born. The people on Tongtian Peak changed countenance, looked at each other, such a strange, unparalleled evil skill. Not only they had never seen it before, they had never heard of it. In Central Plains for thousands of years, in countless ancient books, no one had ever recorded this kind of soul-stirring evil skill. Even Reverend Daoxian could not help but inhale a breath of cold air, staring in shock at that beast deity who was originally an ordinary youth. Right now, seemed to be expanding, until he finally stopped splitting, standing before Reverend Dao Xian, facing the Zhu Xian sword formation, was already a 10 zhongs tall, 1,000-armed, 100-headed monster. Tong Tian Peak Rear Mountain, Illusory Moon Cave. Right now, the purple energy column rising from the cave was still the same, did not show any signs of weakening. Looking from afar, that energy column looked like an entity, propitious vapor rising, solemn and dignified. At this moment, more than half of the sky was filled with the sword chi of the immortal slaying sword formation. Even though they were far away, Ghost Li and Lin Jingyu could feel the surging power of the ancient sword of the immortal slaying sword. Suppressing the trembling dragon slayer sword in his hand, Lin Jingyu retracted his gaze from the sky, in his heart shocked by the ancient sword Zhu Xian's power. At the same time, his mood also had a slight change. Just now, he and Ghostly were almost at the edge of deciding life and death. Suddenly, this Zhu Xian sword formation was activated. A myriad of phenomena immediately shocked the two of them. Both of them stopped at the same time. And speaking of which, most likely that person standing in front of them. Right now, his mood was even more complicated. Lin Jingyu did not know why. This thought flashed past his mind, turned and looked at Ghostly. That, a man who looked like he had experienced the vicissitudes of life, quietly looked up at the sky, that glorious, shocking myriad of phenomena. Heaven and earth quietly turned silent, not knowing where the sound of the wind came from, but what it blew over seemed to be the sound from many years ago, and deep in his mind, for the past 10 years, reverberated countless of times. Each time he thought of it, he felt sad. Ding, ding, ring. The faint sound was like a wind chime, gently swaying in the breeze. Whose smile was it that looked back in the ringing of the bell? The once pale green figure and the warm and gentle body. Only God knew how many cold and desolate nights he had been through all these years with that little bit of warmth. The deepest coldness emerged from his heart, surging up to his heart, chilling his body, from his fingers all the way to his heart. It was as if he could no longer feel a trace of pain, but he suddenly realized that time had already turned into a sharp blade, constantly cutting him. But there was no blood. Bai Yao, he softly murmured, his body for some reason started to tremble. In his eyes, glimmering and reflecting the brilliant thousands of sword lights in the sky, it did not look like a scene from the mortal world. Those innumerable streaks of sword lights crisscrossing, each one so graceful, vivid in his eyes, reminding him of the past. That green figure seemed to be standing beside him, just like 10 years ago, facing everyone, never retreating, never regretting. Ghostly howled to the sky, both of his eyes wide open, both of his hands clenched into fists, making deep sounds. As if sensing its master's anger, the soul-absorbing stick unhurriedly flew up on its entirely black surface. Lines of fine vein-like dark red stripes one by one lit up, reflected in Ghostly's eyes, gradually dyed his eyes blood red. Zhang! The clear ringing of the sword startled him. Ghostly slowly turned his head. A pair of blood-red eyes saw Lin Jingyu's sneering and disdainful expression. "You are really hopeless," Lin Jingyu resolutely said. "I should have known. You have fallen into the evil way. It would be hard to turn back. Unfortunately, I still cherished old sentiments. Hoped you would turn back. Forget it. Today on this Qing Yin Hill, we will settle this once and for all." Ghostly stared at him for a long time, suddenly laughed out loud. His laughter gradually turned crazy, filled with arrogance and disdain. Lin Jingyu was enraged. With an angry bellow, his sword gesture-guided. Immediately bluish-green light expanded. The dragon slayer sword like transformed into a green dragon, soared into the sky. In that instant, a gale blew in front of the illusory moon cave. Lin Jingyu, holding his sword, flew up, his white clothes fluttering, handsome and confident, really like a dragon among men, floating in the world. Just that right now, the murderous look in his eyes was comparable to Ghostly's. In the mid-air, the dragon slayer sword had already slashed down, although it was quite far away, but the sword light surged over, like an unstoppable green dragon, carve out deep grooves on the ground, straight towards Ghostly. Ghostly's face was still that crazed and savage expression, watching the bluish-green light pouncing over. Suddenly his body, like a ghost, instantly disappeared. The Dragon Slayer's sword slashed down, struck where Ghostly was originally standing. Immediately, the hard rocks on the ground split into pieces, creating a huge pit. The next moment, Ghostly's figure suddenly appeared one jong in front of Lin Jingyu. The soul-devouring stick struck out with a loud bang, red light dazzling, whistling over, a strong wind blowing against his face. It was also the same, without any intention of holding back. Lin Jingyu was startled, but did not panic. His body suddenly leapt up, evading the heavy blow, turned back and steered his sword forward. Ghostly gave a long laugh, did not even evade, came face to face. The soul-devouring stick like lightning flew back in his hand, charged towards Lin Jingyu. Two childhood playmates stared at each other angrily, fighting for life and death. Like an arrow leaving the bow, collided in the air. In an instant, a gale whipped up, with the two of them in the air as the epicenter. Invisible sound waves gushed out. The nearby trees were uprooted and flew up. And in the eye of the storm, both of their faces almost at the same time, a trace of pain flashed past Ghostly's face. An indistinct golden light flashed past. This duel that happened at Tongtian Peak Rear Mountain, along with the wind blowing over the lofty mountains and precipitous ridges. When it was transmitted far away, it was already so soft that it could not be heard. Moreover, right now, in the heavens and earth, all the living beings in the world, who would care about them? In the sky, there was an even more important duel. Just that, in the crowd, for some reason, Ainan's body suddenly shook. A faint golden light flashed past her face. She turned her head in shock. Her body stiffened, gazing afar, far away. It was the distant deserted rear mountain. Chapter 328. In the air, Reverend Dao Xian frowned tightly, facing that demon-like beast deity from the netherworld. Not only him, even the good faction people below, each and every one of them were dumbstruck. That monster in the air was as black as ink. The muscles on its huge body bulged, not knowing how many thick and strong arms stretched out from its body. At a rough glance, most likely not less than a few hundred, and because of the witchcraft deformed head and face, it looked even more ferocious and terrifying. It was really an evil beast that had never been seen since the creation of heaven and earth. After the silence, the crowd burst into uproar and clamor. Other than being shaken to the core, even more people had a feeling that it was as expected, like this southern border barbarian tribe, were indeed the most ferocious and evil kind. This monster before them was not like a human, not like a ghost, not like a demon. How could it be a natural creation of the world? In the air, Reverend Dao Xian inhaled deeply, slowly placed the Zhu Xian ancient sword horizontally before his chest. The dazzling white light constantly flashed out from the ancient sword, not only enveloped the ancient sword itself, even Reverend Dao Xian's entire right arm, which was holding the sword, was also enveloped in it. Looking from the outside, right now the sky was filled with sword shadows. Zhu Xian's sword formation awe-inspiring. Reverend Dao Xian was like a celestial being, but for some reason, under his sage-like appearance, his face also started to turn slightly pale. Evildoer, Reverend Dao Xian's voice was like a brass bell big drum. His tone was deep, rumbling out. Compared to the past, it was even more ferocious. You still haven't come to your senses, waiting to be captured? The beast deity transformed into that thousand-armed monster, obviously did not take Reverend Dao Xian's words to heart, and after the transformation, his voice also changed from its peaceful tone, became hoarse and unpleasant, like a broken sandpaper sharpening a steel blade, coldly laughed and said, "Waiting to be captured? After I skin you alive first, then disembowel and dig out these trash's hearts. Send them to meet you in the netherworld. How about that?" Reverend Dao Xian's brows flashed with malice. Without saying anything more, the sword incantation. Immediately the sky, full of sword energy, danced. Zhu Xian's sword formation was once again activated. Even though the monster's tone was arrogant, it naturally didn't dare to be careless when facing this unparalleled sword formation that had only been seen in 1,000 years. But the sonorous sound of the golden drum was heard. From far to near, 7 colorful lights flew up from the ancient sword Zhu Xian, straight into the sword formation in the sky. Immediately the sky was filled with lights, sword shadows crisscrossed. In a blink it had already condensed into 7 huge, single-colored sword formations, like before, facing that beast deity monster. The beast god let out a low roar, and black gas flowed on the surface of his huge body, almost like ink. Hundreds of monstrous hands opened and closed, facing the incoming storm. Reverend Daoxian with a long howl, like a mountain eagle charging up to the sky, straight up to the clouds. Where the howl was, white light exploded. Zhu Xian swayed. The enormous Zhu Xian sword formation moved with a loud rumble. Numerous single-colored swords slowly turned around, aimed at the beast deity. The next moment, in the sky, which had been quiet for a long time, once again a sound of piercing air was heard, followed by an earth-shattering sound. Innumerable Zhu Xian energy swords streaked across the horizon, carrying incomparable malice and murderous intent, charged towards the beast deity. In a blink, the first wave of purple energy swords had already reached. The beast deity's enormous body looked like it was about to become the live target of these innumerable energy swords. However, just when the numerous Qing Yun Hill good faction disciples were about to cheer, the hundreds of monstrous long arms on the beast deity's body suddenly danced. Each arm gathered thick black gas, looking almost like an enormous black cloud, rose to the sky. In an instant, hundreds of energy swords pierced down, and the beast deity's hundreds of monstrous hands, like ghosts, swiftly danced in the air, facing these seemingly indestructible Zhu Xian energy swords. These black hands were not the slightest afraid. In a blink, the first wave of purple energy swords either caught or hit, or entangled or deflected, actually received all of the energy swords. In the black gas, those energy swords very quickly lost their colors, swiftly dissipated. Countless people were speechless. In 1,000 years, this was the first person who could face the Zhu Xian sword formation head-on. Just that, in the changing winds and clouds, it did not give the people more time to think about these superfluous matters, like the long river raging waves, billows surging. That enormous colorful main sword in the sky constantly split into more and more small energy swords, and more energy swords under the control of the ancient sword Zhu Xian and Reverend Daoxian, turned into endless sword rain and fell down. Each energy sword carried Zhu Xian evil energy, awe-inspiring. Wave after wave, like thunder rumbling, like lightning, pounced towards the beast deity. The beast deity roared incessantly to the sky. The deafening voice reverberated in the clouds. Right now, he seemed to be facing the deities in the heaven, fighting against the heaven. The monstrous 1,000 hands and 100 arms wave in the wind and clouds. The black gas surged, layer upon layer, responding to the sky, full of sharp whistling sounds. One wave, another wave, thousands and thousands of energy swords, as if endless, came crashing down, but the beast deity's enormous body looked like the incarnation of a demon, did not have a moment of tiredness. These two figures who had reached the pinnacle of Taoism in this world clashed crazily on this Qingyun hill. Just that, human strength ultimately had its limits. One wave, another wave, until the 49th wave of square sword formation came crashing down. It had already been 7 times by the 7-color sword formation. Reverend Daoxian, who was standing at the peak of the storm, his face was pale. Even his right hand, which was holding the ancient sword Zhu Xian, wrapped in white light, also faintly trembled. And ahead, the beast deity looked even more wretched. After experiencing the baptism of the raging storm like crazy sword formation, the originally awe-inspiring hundreds of odd arms had already been destroyed by more than half, and the thick black gas around him right now looked much thinner. Just that when he received the last wave of energy swords, the savagery on his face instead turned thicker. His will to fight did not diminish, but instead became even higher. A hoarse, strange laugh, like an evil spirit's low growl, exploded out. At this moment, the crowd was dead silent. Everyone turned pale, their faces pale. The soul-stirring battle that had reached the pinnacle of perfection dazzled everyone and made it difficult for them to control themselves. But never had they imagined that even the unparalleled celestial eradication sword formation seemed to be unable to do anything to the peerless demonic beast before them. Could it be that this calamity really can't be avoided? The beast deity laughed to the sky. His enormous body suddenly unbelievably soared up, pounced towards Reverend Daoxian. Immediately, the heavens and earth cries of alarm. Only Reverend Daoxian was shocked but not panicked, took a deep breath, lightly shouted. The water unicorn under his feet had already gained intelligence, immediately retreated. Unexpectedly, although the beast deity's body was huge, but its speed was as fast as lightning. In a blink, it had already arrived before him. Immediately, the black gas surged. Countless of enormous arms grabbed over. At this critical juncture, Reverend Daoxian's Zhu Xian ancient sword abruptly hung upside down. His originally pale face instantly flushed red, and then turned pale again. This rapid repeated 3 times. The ancient sword Zhu Xian light exploded, like a long whale sucking in water, instantly sucked down the numerous energy swords in the sky, horizontally in front of Reverend Daoxian, congealed into a set of colorful sword wall. The beast deity's countenance changed greatly, but it was already too late to stop. Above the firmament, sounds of pa pa pa, ka ka ka, were heard. For a moment the black gas scattered, not knowing how many strange hands were annihilated. Looking at Reverend Daoxian turning from danger to safety, and even severely injuring the beast deity, Qing Yunhil's numerous disciples' mood also changed from shock to joy, cheering and jumping for joy. Unexpectedly, without waiting for their cheers to stop, they saw in that resplendent sword wall, after destroying the numerous black gas strange hands, there was still that thickest and sturdiest black arm. The black gas, especially thick, forcibly passed through. A palm struck on a Reverend Daoxian's chest. Reverend Daoxian, as if struck by lightning, his body shook greatly. Together with the water unicorn under his feet, they both howled to the sky. One man and one beast both flew backwards, flew for several zhang before stopping. And the people below understood. While retreating, Reverend Daoxian's dark green robe instantly shattered. Dark red blood spurted out from his mouth. Bit by bit, seemed to drip onto the ancient sword Zhu Xian, embellishing the dark red light spots in the white light, and then gradually disappeared. Chapter 329. Heaven and Earth, dead silence in an instant. The Zhu Xian sword formation in the horizon seemed to be affected, swayed and swayed. The sky full of sword shadows shook incessantly, but in the end it still stopped. Just that, not knowing if it was because the true way was damaged, the Zhu Xian sword formation, which originally covered the sky and earth, right now had shrunk by more than half. An ominous premonition seemed to shroud everyone's heart. Wiping away the bloodstains at the corner of his mouth, Reverend Daoxian looked at his palm. Dark red blood stains flowed on his palm. He stared at his hand for a long time, and then slowly looked up ahead. Right now, the sword energy and dark clouds had all dissipated. The beast deity was staring at him like a tiger, but looking at it. Although the beast deity had injured himself, but his own condition was not much better. The remaining half of the strange hands, in an instant again, suffered heavy injuries, and more than half were dissipated by the Zhu Xian sword energy. Looking at it now, there were only dozens of them left, but these remaining were the most majestic arms, completely different from the ordinary strange hands. And the beast deity himself, his face, which was originally shrouded in black gas, right now seemed to have turned slightly pale, but the fighting spirit on his face, like the most ferocious beast, grew stronger with each setback, without any intention of giving up. Reverend Daoxian's mouth twitched, seemed to be smiling bitterly. Just that this slight movement seemed to have affected his injuries. His body swayed a few times, causing the numerous people below to cry out in shock. But fortunately, he only swayed a few times and then stabilized his body. Just that right now his weakness was obvious. The beast deity sneered, in a deep voice said, "How is it, ignorant humans like you? Even with this kind of divine object to help, it is still not an ordinary outcome. You better kill yourself while it is still early." Reverend Daoxian silently looked up, facing the firmament. The Zhu Xian sword's light reflected on his face, suddenly had a strange expression. Qing Yun's sect ancestors. Reverend Daoxian suddenly spoke, but the words, his tone was deep and slightly pained, said, "Disciple Daoxian is unworthy, powerless to subdue the evil, implicated the common people, calamity is imminent. For the sake of the people of the world, this disciple has no choice but to disobey the ancestral master's restrictions. I hope that the ancestral master will protect me and eliminate the demons. Even if this disciple is consigned to eternal damnation in the future, I am willing to bear the responsibility." His voice was very soft, and not many people could hear him. However, when they saw him murmuring something, and his face looked as if he was in pain, they were all confused and had no idea what he was doing. Just that after a moment, suddenly in the air, Reverend Daoxian opened his eyes and frowned. Awe-inspiring, his left-hand sword gesture suddenly led straight towards the Zhu Xian ancient sword in front of his chest. White light flashed, suddenly red light flashed. Reverend Daoxian's left hand pierced into the white light. When he came out again, blood splattered, but although his face was pale, but there was no trace of pain, his left hand swiftly waved, very quickly drawing a strange pattern in the air, and the blood dripping from his fingers did not fall down. Instead, following his hand movements, it condensed in the air, forcefully revealing the pattern. It was a blood-red Taiji diagram. Dark red blood swiftly flowed on the Taiji diagram, turning brighter and brighter, almost like red jade, and the Taiji diagram itself also started to spin rapidly. Reverend Daoxian's face turned paler and paler. At the same time, the ancient sword Zhu Xian wrapped in the white light started to tremble slightly, as if in this legendary celestial sword, something seemed to be startled, yearning for something. That Taiji diagram spun faster and faster, slowly rose, reached 3 chi in front of Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxian's face was already extremely pale, as if his entire body's vitality was being sucked away by this Taiji diagram, but he still used the last of his strength, raised the ancient sword Zhu Xian, suddenly stabbed. One sword pierced through this blood Taiji diagram. At the same time, he shouted loudly, "Heaven! Machine! Seal!" Every time he shouted a word, in the clear universe, above the cloudless blue sky, it was accompanied by a thunderclap that shook the heavens and the earth. An awe-inspiring force descended from the sky. It was invisible, but seemed to have substance, penetrating through the top. Where the violent wind blew, on his body, bang, bang, bang like explosions, accompanied by his 3 shouts, his clothes instantly exploded, turned into ashes. And under his feet, on the vast land, the enormous Qing Yun mountain range rumbled. The earth started to tremble slightly, Qing Yun Hill towering into the clouds 7 mountain peaks. Without exception, Tong Tian, Dragon Head, Yang Yang, Luo Xia, Feng Hui, Big Bamboo, Small Bamboo 7 branches, green mountains, deep valleys, majestic walls, and huge rocks. Golden light actually seeped out, getting stronger and stronger, brighter and brighter, gradually converged into a shape, the golden light. Resplendent, as if projected from the depths of the mountain peaks, and also as if many of the mountain ranges actually had life. In this dazzling golden light, the enormous mountain peaks slowly breathed. And in the swaying, dazzling golden light, finally converged into 7 different enormous golden diagrams on the mountain peaks on the earth, facing that ancient sword Zhu Xian in the horizon. Dazzling the horizon, splendid and brilliant. Even the beast deity was aghast. Zhu Xian ancient sword trembled more and more violently, and that Taiji diagram that it pierced through was already spinning so fast that it could not be seen clearly. Reverend Daoxian's face flashed, suddenly opened his eyes, and shouted loudly, "Break!" When the word break came out, instantly the sky full of sword shadows swayed violently. The vast horizon, completely darkened, the violent wind moved stones, the mountains shook and the earth quaked, the strange rocks fell one after another. The originally solemn and magnificent 7 meridians golden pattern, as if it was torn apart by some great force, started to gradually disperse. And almost at the same time, the ancient sword Zhu Xian's light became more and more intense, the white light dazzling, even enveloped Reverend Daoxian's entire body. And in this earth-shaking and mountain-shaking scene, the 7 colors of light that rose from the 7 mountain peaks suddenly disappeared. At the same time, the sky full of sword images also gradually faded, leaving only that 7-colored main sword in the Zhu Xian sword formation. Instead became even more dazzling. Rumble. A sound of thunder reverberated through heaven and earth. The earth quaked even more violently. Those golden circles of light on the 7 mountain peaks had already reached the final moment, finally, completely disappeared. The rumble of thunder, like the tide, reverberated and surged in the horizon, and the earth beneath their feet suddenly quietened down, no longer shaking, no longer splitting. Following which, almost at the same time, different colored lights that were 10 times more intense than before rose with a rumble, charged up to the sky, once again converged on the ancient sword Zhu Xian. The blazing light instantly, like an explosion, illuminated heaven and earth, shot out in all directions, The incredible light enveloped the entire heaven and earth above the ancient Zhu Xian sword formation. Only the huge, colorful main sword was left, but at this moment, the ancient sword Zhu Xian reflected rays of magnificent huge light, little by little, in the thousands of people's shocked gazes. That seven-colored Zhu Xian main sword, from the flowing lights, gradually became a single color, blazing white huge sword. The light rays 10,000 zhongs, illuminated the world. In an instant, countless people awoke from the shock, looking at the unbelievable scene in the horizon. Everyone was intoxicated. Crazy cheers rose and fell, filling the azure cloud hill. Everyone suddenly recovered from despair, in the blink of an eye, seemed to be filled with confidence. So in this world, evil would not prevail over good, completely disregarding the fact that this battle was still not over. The outcome was still unknown. Just that, in such a crazy crowd, everyone was looking up at the sky. No one would notice. In the frenzy, a white figure quietly left the crowd, swiftly drifting towards the rear mountain. The wind brushed past her cheeks, as if there was a trace of coldness, but how could it conceal, deep in her heart, that blazing fire burning? Ainin Sweki's snow-white face indistinctly blushed, tightly biting her lips, deep in her eyes, had long gone to the depths of the rear mountain. In the horizon, the storm was urgent, but who would still care? The faint ancient song, low murmurs, along with that white clothes fluttering, carried by the wind, rushed towards that unknown distance. Chapter 330. Different from that earth-shattering great fight at the front mountain, the battle between Ghost Li and Lin Jingyu. These two childhood friends, the scale of the battle was much smaller than the former, but the intensity level seemed to be even more than that. Nobody would have thought of it. The men who were once as close as brothers had finally reached this stage. The figures of the two people suddenly separated and suddenly collided, like a violent storm engulfing the surroundings of the illusory moon cave. All the trees fell, or were uprooted, or were chopped in half. Even the hard and thick ground was completely changed by the two people's extremely powerful magic power, full of potholes, deep pits, and crushed rocks everywhere. Just based on skills and powers, Ghostly possessed several schools of true ways and also practiced 3 volumes of Evil Sect Classic, Tian Shu. His skills and powers were so high that it was not something an ordinary cultivator could compare to, close to the world's #1 figure. Even Lin Jingyu, the kind of rare talent, could not be compared to him. But right now, both of them were fighting. For some reason, they were evenly matched. If based on the reason, there were actually only 2 reasons. First was that Lin Jingyu's character was intense. These 10 years of following the mysterious old man in Founder's ancestral hall to practice. What he learnt was precisely the ferocious skills that stimulated his body's potential, combined with his nature and the Dragon Slayer sword's unstoppable momentum. His fighting power was actually a notch higher than his actual cultivation. And right now his chest was filled with hatred, each sword strike taking lives, almost like that legendary one Jianni 100 years ago, unstoppable. And although Ghost Li's skills were high and his foundation solid, but he had a weakness, which had always been restricting him. The year he practiced Qing Yun's sect Taoism, Tai Chi Xian Qing Wei, True Wei, and Tian Im Temple Buddhism, Great Brahmin Wisdom, at the same time, both conflicted with each other and his progress was slow. Although in the future he was lucky enough to learn the Tian Shu general principles and was able to link these 2 strange skills together, his skills improved greatly, but in his body, his foundation great skills had already been changed to the Evil Sect Classic, Tian Shu skills. It was just that this Tian Shu special technique was abstruse and profound. It also had a disadvantage. Although the general principles were all there, the Taoist skills in the book, within the 3 volumes, were not complete. Every time when it was practiced to a crucial point, there would be a break. Just like when a person was walking on a smooth road, the great Tao came and went. Suddenly there was a precipice in front of him. He could not go forward. He wanted to take another path, but there was no way out. It was not a small number. These years the sinister orb's vicious energy backlash. Ghostly was unable to resist. Most likely came from this. As a result, Ghostly's cultivation could not be fully unleashed. But even if it was so, Ghostly's several true ways, how could they be ordinary? although the Tianshu special skills were not complete, but it was after all an epic-making special skill. All kinds of marvelousness. It was not what a normal person could imagine. The two of them fought for a long time, and eventually it was Ghostly who gradually gained the upper hand. The sinister orb's red blood energy, like a venomous snake swallowing and spitting, gradually suppressed the Dragon Slayer's sword's Jade Greenlight. Bei was shocked and angry. Although for the past 10 years Ghostly had rebelled against Qing Yun and joined the evil faction, becoming enemies with the good faction, but he had never had a direct conflict with Qing Yun. And Bei had always been practicing in Founder's Ancestral Hall. Therefore, although both of them had met once in the Southwest Death Marsh, but it could be said that they had never fought. In Bei's heart, Ghostly was actually still mostly that dull Zhang Xiaofan impression. Since young, from Grass Temple Village to Qing Yun Hill, which part of Bei was not stronger than Zhang Xiaofan. Although in his heart, he had always treated Zhang Xiaofan like a brother, but unknowingly, with his arrogant character since young, he looked down on Zhang Xiaofan on many matters. And for many years, things were indeed as he thought. Zhang Xiaofan was not as smart as him, not as handsome as him. When he went up to Qing Yun Hill, many of the teachers also fought to take him in as a disciple, but no one bothered about Zhang Xiaofan. After both of them parted ways, he went to Longshou Valley. Zhang Xiaofan went to Big Bamboo Valley. Their skills were far apart. All these situations all showed that Zhang Xiaofan really could not compare to him. Just that after that time at Qing Yun Hill Seven Peaks Tournament, Zhang Xiaofan somehow had good luck and actually squeezed into the top 4. And at that time, he met his senior brother Kevern and was defeated. Although he felt a little depressed, but most of the people also knew the reason. Bei did not change his mind. All along, he saw Zhang Xiaofan like a brother. When Zhang Xiaofan was bullied, he also sternly stood up, as if looking after his own good-for-nothing younger brother. Until today, when they broke off relations, fought for life and death, Bei was surprised to discover that this person who had always been below him, unknowingly had already surpassed him. A nameless fire of anger suddenly ignited in his heart. Bei's handsome face suddenly looked ferocious. His arrogant character, the only disadvantage was that he loved to go to extremes too much. For a moment, he could not accept this fact. The Jade green light rose, like an arrogant dragon roaring, indignantly counterattacked. In the fierce battle, the purple energy light pillar, because the Heaven's secret seal had been broken, was several times thicker than before. The purple energy had already enveloped both of them. Bei was at a disadvantage, but suddenly counterattacked. His sword force, like toppling the mountains and overturning the seas, surged over. Ghostly was shocked, watched Bei moving with his sword after sword. Although the power was great, but he had already disregarded his own safety, like fighting with his life on the line. Ghostly frowned tightly. Right now, it had been a period of time since both of them started fighting. Perhaps because this place was Qing Yun Hill's sacred place, and also because of the purple energy pillar triggered by Zhu Xian Ancient Sword. At the beginning, the vicious energy in Ghostly's heart, not only did it not control his mind like before, instead it allowed his body's pure power, slowly subsided. Ghostly's mind also gradually regained clarity. Just at the sky above his head was that Zhu Xian sword formation. For the past 10 years, he did not think of this thing. It was really engraved in his bones and heart. Biyu's figure kept on swaying before his eyes, and also sorrowful. And this person in front of him, after regaining his consciousness, Ghostly again recalled their many years of friendship, and right now his anger. Most of it was also caused by himself. Recalling that old man in Founder's Ancestral Hall, Ghostly more or less felt ashamed. Because of this, he gradually lost the will to fight. Alongside, in his distraught, Ghostly no longer had the mood to fight, only felt that right now this place, it was really unbearable and wanted to leave. There was a painful longing in his heart. He wished he could return to majestic Fox Mountain in a blink of an eye, see Bai Yu, and tell her everything. And at this moment, Bei's sword had already appeared out of thin air, sharp whistling over, jade green light like lightning, piercing the sky. Ghostly's face darkened, continuously retreated 3 steps. The soul-devouring stick struck down from above, right onto the Dragon Slayer sword blade. Lin Jingyu's body shook violently. He felt a strange, bloody aura coming from the black stick that looked like a fire stick. At the same time, there was a strange suction force that actually affected the blood essence in his body. It was about to surge out, and he almost couldn't control himself. Lin Jingyu turned pale with fright, guessed that it was Ghost Li's evil magical weapon, but with his unyielding character, he was not afraid at all, did not retreat, and instead advanced. The Dragon Slayer sword, like a swimming dragon at the bottom of the sword, leapt up, disregarding his own chest being wide open, attacked straight towards Ghost Li's face. Ghost Li's eyes flashed. Right now, if he made a move, although he would inevitably be seriously injured, but he had 100% confidence he could kill Bei. Just that looking at that familiar face, Ghost Li's heart suddenly like lightning flashed past the figure of the two of them playing together, and then Bei's face. In this world, how many people are there that I can cherish, still living in the mortal world? As if mocking himself, he smiled bitterly and asked himself, kept the soul-devouring stick, leapt into the air, and avoided this imminent crisis. Just that his bitter smile, in Bei's eyes, was like a sneer, made him even more furious. And at this moment, Ghostly, who was in the air, suddenly shook, looked afar, saw a white figure, swift like lightning, drifting over. After seeing the situation, that person's body also seemed to be greatly shaken. A beautiful face revealed a mixture of surprise and joy, indistinguishable expression. Even her voice also trembled slightly. "You, it really is you," it was Lu Sueki. On her snow-white face, not knowing when, for the first time in her life, 2 drops of tears quietly rolled down. That man looked at her in shock, unhurriedly landed from the air, that familiar face, how many years of unforgettable longing. At that time when she thought he was finally dead, what kind of grief and agony was that? If not for the fact that there was an outsider right now, she really wanted to throw herself into his arms, have a good cry. Who was willing to live a bitter and lonely life? Who was willing to spend their days alone? If not for the fact that she could not control her emotions when she was in the depths, how would she be so tender and cold like frost? Ghostly was also stunned, opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Unexpectedly at this moment, Bei behind him did not stop. The Dragon Slayer sword like wind, like fire. With a loud shout, it still swept over. Ghostly was startled, turned around to face the enemy. He had already lost the initiative. The jade green light was dazzling, about to reach him. Ghostly's face turned vicious. The sinister orb instantly turned red. And at this moment of imminent peril, suddenly, as if a long time ago memory, faintly awoke. A fair hand, stretched over from beside, held Ghostly's wrist. Ghostly's body shook. Suddenly, the strength in his body seemed to completely disappear. A surge of passion that was about to burst out from the deepest part gushed up his heart. A buzzing sound in his mind. Abruptly turned his head. A Baiyao was about to call out. Just that he was stunned. Blocking in front of him, white clothes fluttering, it was Lu Sueki. Chong Lang, like a phoenix's cry in the 9 heavens, clear and melodious. Tianya's celestial sword like autumn water flowing, unsheathed. One sword deflected the unstoppable Dragon Slayer sword. Lu Sueki even stood in front of Ghostly. That delicate and beautiful face, infinite tenderness, but how could she care about everything in this world? Bei angrily shouted, "Lu Jr.'s sister, are you crazy?" Lu Sueki's body shook, as if awakened from a dream. Then, she quietly turned her head, looked at Ghostly, her eyes blurred yet beautiful, gently smiled. She slowly let go of Ghostly's hand. "Crazy?" Lu Sueki faintly smiled, as if there was only Ghostly in her eyes, quietly said, "A long time ago, I must have already gone crazy." Ghostly was silent. The vicious look on his face dissipated. Only pain flashed past his face, quietly hung his head. Bei was stunned. The scene, for a moment, quietened down. And at this moment, suddenly from the horizon, an earth-shattering, deafening sound was heard. The mountain range immediately shook violently. Even with their skills, they could not stand steadily. Chapter 331. The 3 of them were shocked, looked up at the horizon, saw above the clouds. That unprecedented catastrophe had finally reached the final moment. The blazing white light, dazzling, no one could see clearly the figures in that ball of light. They only saw the dazzling light in the sky lit up the entire firmament. Even the rising sun in the horizon finally lost its color. And in the entire horizon, The Zhu Xian sword formation, which was once magnificent, right now only had one main sword left, but that hidden power even surpassed the sky, full of sword images. The increasingly blazing white light from Reverend Daoxian's ball of light shot onto the main sword. The entire main sword's color from 7 colors to a single color, from a single white to pure white. Radiance 10,000 zhongs, like a wild sword which was about to break the sky. In the violent wind, the beast deity stood above the clouds, watching that celestial sword which should not even appear in the mortal world. A trace of bewilderment appeared on his ferocious face. In the thousands of anticipating gazes, in the thousands of celebratory cheers, the enormous blazing celestial sword slowly moved, turned around, and faced the beast deity. In the next moment, the black gas around the beast deity was forced back several zhongs by this naturally hostile white light. Deep in the white light, someone seemed to be panting deeply, the voice hoarse like a ferocious beast growling, a trapped beast roaring. The beast deity stared intently at that celestial sword and that ball of white light. After a long time, suddenly laughed out loud. His voice was already hoarse and unpleasant to listen to. Right now he laughed out loud. It was even more ear-piercing. The listeners all turned to look. The beast deity was seen laughing loudly, his demeanor crazily, as if in his heart there was the most ridiculous thing in the world, but in the end he only laughed wildly, did not say a word more. In the horizon, the violent wind became more and more desolate. Zhu Xian's celestial sword's power also became stronger and stronger. Not knowing since when, a voice seemed to be heard from the heaven realm and hell, quietly chanting a mysterious incantation, started to reverberate between heaven and earth. That ball of scorching white light suddenly rose into the air, landed on that Zhu Xian main sword hilt. Almost at the same time, Zhu Xian's sword formation was already activated, like it was going to break the sky. That wild sword whistled over, looked slow, but in the sky and on the ground, there seemed to be no place to hide. Meet God, kill God. Meet immortal, kill immortal. In this world, there was nothing that had this kind of aura. The whirlwind swept away the clouds, all scattered. No one would know, right now facing the Zhu Xian wild sword, what exactly was the beast deity thinking. Just that he did not have the slightest fear, even more without any intention of retreating, facing the wind, facing the light. The beast deity's enormous body leapt up, actually flew towards the Zhu Xian wild sword. Heaven and earth seemed to be silent. Even the untainted land was holding its breath. People stared at the blue sky with their mouths agape. Black and white streaked across the sky and collided with a loud bang. No one could describe the scene at that time. The sky collapsed. The earth cracked. Mount Qingyun mountain range shook 3 times in a day. This time, it was the most severe. Between the huge mountain peaks and precipices, countless cracks appeared. Numerous boulders fell off the mountain, falling down. Within the icy jade pool on the peak of Tongtian, the water was even more turbulent. The originally smooth surface of the pool constantly shot up into the air in pillars of water that were dozens of feet tall. And at Mount Qingyun, the good faction people and the remaining demon beasts were all as quiet as cicadas in winter, especially those demon beasts that looked like beasts but not beasts. Right now, they were even more frightened, restless, roaring madly. However, all of these compared to the earth-shattering scene in the sky seemed to be nothing, and no one would care. The enormous Zhu Xian main sword streaked across the horizon, thrusted down. Where it passed, sharp sounds could be heard in the air. Everything along the way were all turned into ashes, not leaving a trace. On the periphery of the wild sword blade, one could see the outer edge of the white light appear dark red. Not knowing if it was because of the intense friction in the air or this wild sword itself was too intense. That sword came crashing down. The beast deity howled to the sky, all of his arms clasped together before his chest, his strange eyes opened wide. The moment Zhu Xian main sword stabbed down, suddenly the black gas surged. The strange hand stretched and retracted. A shocking thunder rumbled in the horizon. He actually forcibly grabbed this celestial sword that seemed to be able to split the sky. In an instant, the heavens and the earth were all aghast. However, the white light sword, thousands of zhong of brilliance, the enormous Zhu Xian main sword made rumbling thunder sounds from the dozens of black hands like iron hoop, abruptly, slowly stabbed down. An inch, another inch. The black hands, one by one, slowly swallowed by the blazing white light and dissipated. That wild sword right now looked like an unparalleled evil deity, brandishing its fangs and brandishing its claws, taking away people's lives, carrying endless murderous intention. Bit by bit, it stabbed towards the beast deity's chest. The black gas flashed, a shrill howl shot up to the sky, black blood sprayed out. Zhu Xian's sword finally stabbed into the beast deity's chest, and had already stabbed an inch by inch. The blazing white light flickered intensely, like lightning scurrying in the horizon, struck on the beast deity's skin. The skin and flesh quietly faded. The enormous body seemed to become illusory, about to be broken in a void by this earth-shattering power. The light in the beast deity's eyes became weaker and weaker. In the end, he was no match for this exceptional celestial sword. His body under the Zhu Xian sword became smaller and smaller, but for some reason, as if the power was exhausted, following the beast deity's body gradually becoming smaller. The huge Zhu Xian main sword also started to shrink. Only that ball of light was still so bright and dazzling. This situation continued until the beast deity finally returned to the size of a normal person. The black gas shrouded for a moment, dispersed with a loud bang. The crowd saw clearly he had changed back to that young man, just that right now his face was pale, his hair disheveled. Evidently his defeat was already decided. And more importantly, almost at the same time the black gas dispersed, Zhu Xian main sword also dispersed, but that ball of light still congealed in front of the beast deity, flickering nonstop, finally gathered between the two of them, transformed into that stone yet not stone, jade yet not jade, ancient Zhu Xian sword, stabbed into the beast deity's chest, horizontally pierced out. Reverend Daoxian's figure slowly appeared from the light, just that his face was not the same as before, instead became abruptly ferocious, his eyes even more bloodshot. The beast deity panted heavily, coughed incessantly, his lips slightly trembling, looked down at his chest. The Zhu Xian sword was stabbed into his heart, the blood flowing out from the middle, but it was not red. He laughed bitterly, heaved a long sigh, said, "Amazing. Already. Can't afford." Suddenly, his voice had just landed, his hands clasped together. Right now his body had reverted to a normal person. His arms were also like a normal person, but with this, he clamped the Zhu Xian sword between his palms. Immediately the black gas surged, straight into the ancient Zhu Xian sword blade. Ka! An almost inaudible sound was heard from the Zhu Xian ancient sword blade. Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed greatly. Quickly looked over, on the ancient sword, a clear crack appeared, horizontally on the Zhu Xian sword. Reverend Daoxian was extremely shocked. With a loud roar, exerted all his strength, pulled out the sword. Almost at the same time, the moment the Zhu Xian sword was pulled out from the beast deity's chest, as if a sharp pain struck his heart, the beast deity also roared loudly, his voice mournful. His entire body leapt up and flew backwards. Reverend Daoxian right now felt the blood in his brain churning like stormy waves. A murderous, vicious energy rolled over and over, as if it wanted to burst out his chest, but his cultivation was profound. He knew that no matter what, he could not let the tiger return to the mountain. Furthermore, he had forcefully opened the heaven's secret seal. The earth vein's spiritual energy was too abundant. It had already overtaxed the Zhu Xian sword. Just now it was struck by that evil beast's dying blow, leaving a crack. Immediately he took a deep breath and was about to pursue, when suddenly he felt a tremendous force coming from the Zhu Xian sword, straight into his brain. In an instant it broke through the meridians and chi acupoints that he had cultivated for hundreds of years. A loud rumble sounded. For a moment, his body trembled, blood flowed out from the 7 apertures of his head, his body swayed twice. With a loud cry, the Zhu Xian sword in his hand loosened. He fell down from the clouds. This soul-stirring scene dazzled the people below. Dumbstruck, suddenly a great change occurred. The beast deity escaped with heavy injuries. Reverend Daoxian instead suddenly fainted. The crowd immediately fell into chaos. For a moment, some went to chase after the beast deity. Some rushed over to save Reverend Daoxian. And some young disciples came to their senses from a shock, suddenly discovered that there were still numerous demon beasts on Tongtian Peak staring blankly. Immediately attacked over. And how would the demon beasts be willing to surrender? For a moment, Tongtian Peak, another commotion. And in this chaos, suddenly someone cried out. The voice was urgent and panicked, as if he had seen the most terrifying thing in his life. Zhu Xian. Where's the Zhu Xian sword? Where did the Zhu Xian sword go to? In that instant, Tong Tian Peak, another huge commotion, numerous people like headless flies, in a mess. Rear mountain boundary. The purple gas column in the illusory moon cave slowly dissipated, leaving only a little propitious gas. The scene in the sky just now was soul-stirring. The three of them were all stunned. Right now, they then regained their senses. Lin Jingyu breathed deeply, composed himself, spoke to Lu Sueki coldly. Lu Junior sister, what is your intention? Don't tell me you also want to betray the sect? Lu Sueki was stunned, opened her mouth to speak, but turned to look at Ghostly. In the end, did not say anything. Ghostly looked deeply at her. Both of their gazes met, as if they could see each other's deep heart. Ghostly smiled, turned his head, facing Lin Jingyu. Again stood in front of Lu Sueki. Lu Sueki looked at that back figure, her eyes glimmering, complicated and difficult to understand. Lin Jingyu coldly smiled and was about to make a move. And at this moment, suddenly a sharp whistle was heard in the sky, whistling over. The three of them were shocked and stepped back, only to see an object falling from the sky. It seemed slow, but was actually very fast. With a pu sound, it landed on the ground. The originally extremely hard stone slab was like tofu as it was pierced deeply into the ground. This was a long sword. The sword material was strange, like stone yet not stone. The style was simple and unadorned, only on the sword blade with a thin crack, clearly engraved two words, Zhu Xian. Chapter 332. Qingyun Hill, Tong Tian Peak. In front of the illusory moon cave, Ghostly, Lu Sueki, and Lin Jingyu stood facing each other. The already delicate atmosphere suddenly seemed to stiffen. All of their attention, in an instant, were focused on that ancient sword stuck in the ground. Zhu Xian, the ancient sword whose name shook the world, the legendary sword that involved countless events of the past, the sword that determined the fate of countless people, was quietly inserted into the ground at this moment. It looked ordinary and inconspicuous, as if it had already become one with the mountains and rivers. Just that, the name on the sword blade was so glaring and insufferably arrogant, although silent but unyielding, sternly staring at the people around, making the people around it unable to breathe smoothly. Not knowing how much time had passed, like waking up from the inconceivable shock, the three of them heaved a long sigh at the same time, but almost at the same time, the atmosphere between them had already quietly changed. Lin Jingyu instinctively moved, wanted to go up, but after he looked at the two people around him, frowned and slowly steadied his body. Lu Sueki's expression was first stunned, and then an extremely bright glint flashed in her eyes. Facing this ancient sword that had supreme position in Qingyun and even in the world, she also frowned slightly. Following which, she subconsciously glanced at Ghostly beside her. Watching his expression, she quietly distanced herself from Ghostly. Ghostly was silent, as if he was expressionless, but in his eyes, it was as if a flame was burning. That sword, the ancient sword that had appeared in his nightmares for the past 10 years, was impressively right before his eyes. The simple and unadorned sword blade right now in a mountain breeze seemed to be glimmering with a faint light, reflected in his eyes, like piercing into his chest. That was a graceful and powerless green figure that was gently falling from the sky. Ah! A furious roar seemed to burst out from his chest, tearing his heart and lungs, charging towards the Zhu Xian ancient sword. Dark green light glimmered, the soul-absorbing stick whistled forward before him, as if feeling its master's emotions. Just that abruptly, a jade green sword light slashed out from his side. Lin Jingyu, holding the Dragon Slayer sword, had already blocked in front of him. The raging jade green sword light forcefully blocked the sharp, whistling dark green energy. A muffled sound, the two magical weapons had already clashed in midair. Lin Jingyu was about to shout for them to stop. Suddenly, he felt that although he was in broad daylight, but with Ghost Li's strange magical weapon around him, suddenly the sky darkened. Ghost cries rumbled all around. His body seemed to be bound by thousands of invisible chains, even before his eyes. Uncontrollably, there were all kinds of horrible, netherworld illusions. And Ghost Li's eyes had unknowingly turned blood red again, his murderous aura surging, his figure even more like a ghost. Lin Jingyu stared and shouted, The jade-green light exploded in the black energy, abruptly leapt up from above. Almost at the same time, Ghostly's figure had already reached his position. The black energy, with a rumble spread out like demonic wings, swirled and gathered into a ghost hand, submerging Ghostly's figure from all directions like raging waves, surged towards the Juxian ancient sword. Lin Jingyu was forced to retreat in midair, unable to block in time. He was anxious and was about to shout in anger when suddenly before the Juxian ancient sword, deep in the black energy, a ray of light as bright as autumn water, like frost and snow, blossomed out. The clear sound resounded, reverberating far away. In the black energy, it bloomed like a flower, a sword stabbed out. Tianya, that snow-like white light, streaked across the air. Where it passed, the black energy dispersed, straight to the deepest front, blocking the way. Anan appeared before the Juxian ancient sword, her face expressionless. On her beautiful face, her face was pale without a trace of blood. Deep in the black energy, two spots like willow wisps stared straight at Anan, ghostly howl eerily, furious and uncontrollable. As if, ahead, like a wild beast roaring and panting, so unfamiliar. The black energy exploded, from the ground abruptly rose to several zhongs high in the air, and in the black energy, those two ferocious willow wisps immediately disappeared. Lu Sueki's mouth twitched slightly, her face still pale and expressionless. Only her eyes flashed incessantly, like thousands of mountains and rivers, passing by in an instant. Thousands of emotions rushed into her heart. Just that Tianya in her hand still refused to give up. That ancient sword behind her suddenly seemed to turn into a bottomless abyss, making her unable to retreat even an inch. An ancient sword, or a silent and ancient sect that nurtured her. She raised the sword to the sky, quietly stabbed. That sword, light like snow, carried a trace of desolation. The black energy dense, ghostly howls abruptly sounded. In the air, just where Tianya was stabbing, a black figure appeared. Ghostly appeared from the depths of the black energy, but before him, the soul-devouring stick flew up. In an instant, the overwhelming black energy spread down. The entirely black soul-devouring stick shrieked incessantly. The strange blood-red threads at the end of the stick all lit up. A pale hand, stretched out from the air, grabbed hold of the soul-devouring stick, descended from the sky. The wind and smoke immediately raged. Innumerable black energy condensed into a pillar at the front of the soul-devouring stick, struck down from the sky. Towards Anan, and also towards her, that silent ancient sword. Just that, she in the end still did not retreat. The sword, light like snow, spilled towards the black energy. Before it even touched, the surrounding rocks and dust were already swirled up by a great force, like a storm swirling and dancing. Anan stood in the middle of that vortex, her face gradually blurred. Tianya and soul-devouring stick, the two magical weapons dancing and glittering in the air, seemed to be trembling gently, as if that battle many years ago again returned before her eyes. Just that time was ultimately short, like emotions passing by in a blink of an eye. A violent rumble finally still resounded in front of the illusory moon cave above Qingyun. The wind and smoke quietly dispersed, the dust settled. There were still a few small pebbles spinning on the ground, involuntarily gently rolling far away, and finally rolled into the depths of the grass, no longer visible. Anan was still standing at the same spot. Her body did not move an inch from her original position. Behind her, the Juxian ancient sword still seemed to be emitting an ancient light, staring at that girl's back figure. For some reason, this exceptional girl, right now her eyes and expression, was that tired, as if that sword just now had exhausted her mental and physical strength. She faintly lowered her head, her eyes indifferent, staring at an unknown place. Not knowing how long, she then slowly raised her head, looked ahead of her. That man who was like a madman, that man who was as silent as steel, that pair of eyes, quietly watching her. There was no murderous intent, no anger, and also no love and gentleness. Lu Sueki's body suddenly trembled, that slight, even she almost thought it was her illusion. But what followed, the pain in her chest that made her almost bend over, like the sharpest steel needle in the world, pierced through her heart. Her pale as snow face suddenly turned red, her body swayed gently. The moment her brows slightly frowned, When she was about to clench her teeth and persevere, she suddenly closed her eyes, bent down. Tianya, a light sound, stabbed into the ground. Anan held onto the sword hilt, spat out a small mouthful of blood, splashed onto the autumn water like swordblade. The blood, gradually congealed into beads, adhered onto Tianya's smooth sword blade, trembled slightly, and then quietly slid down. A wind blew from somewhere, in the empty space before the illusory moon cave, swayed and swept past, carrying a few light whistles in the wind. The black gas dissipated, ghostly indifferently stood there, the soul-absorbing stick glimmering with dark green light, descended from the sky. He stretched out his hand to catch it. Just when Ghostly turned to look at Lu Sweki, Lin Jingyu had already turned and appeared beside Lu Sweki, holding that Zhu Xian ancient sword behind him. Ghostly's eyes coldly looked at Lin Jingyu and then at Anan's face. These two to him were almost the most important people in the world, but in his eyes, they were no different from strangers. In this world, a lifetime of time, how many people could a company till old never change? He clenched his teeth, showing his teeth, smiling but proud and aloof, resolute and unyielding, striding forward. That ancient sword was just ahead. Even if it was a bottomless abyss, he would still charge towards it. 10 years of time, 10 years of heart-wrenching pain. How could he give it up in one day? Lin Jingyu's face was filled with anger. The Dragon Slayer sword in his hand glowed again. And at this moment, suddenly Anan stood up straight. Although her face looked even paler, but her voice was still as clear and moving as before. Stop! Ghostly paused for a moment, then looked deeply at Lu Sweki, sternly said, You move aside. Anan's face looked forlorn, said, You listen to me. Go. Never come back. Chapter 333. Lin Jingyu frowned, glanced at Lu Sweki, wanted to speak but stopped. Ghostly heard it but did not seem to appreciate Lu Sweki's intentions, coldly laughed and said, You all let me destroy Zhu Xian. I will leave immediately. Lu Sweki tiredly shook her head, quietly said, I cannot let you do that. The people from the front mountain will be here soon. You can still make it if you leave now. Ghostly and Lin Jingyu were both surprised, concentrated and listened carefully. As expected, they could hear faint voices from afar. It seemed like there were still quite a number of people arguing about something. Actually thinking about it, it was not strange. Zhu Xian ancient sword was a divine weapon in Qinyan's sect, its importance unparalleled. Qinyan sect could not find it everywhere in the front mountain battlefield. Naturally, they would search the rear mountain. Not to mention the rear mountain. Even if they had to turn the entire Qing Yun hill upside down. For Zhu Xian ancient sword, most likely Qing Yun sect disciples and grand disciples would also be willing. The noise in the distance gradually became louder and clearer. It was obvious that the crowd was heading here to search. Ghostly's face gradually turned cold, suddenly snorted, his figure moved, disregarding everything, flew towards Lu Sweki and Lin Jingyu. Lu Sweki's face was pale, but before she could move, Lin Jingyu had already leapt up, the Dragon Slayer sword with a sound like it was tearing silk in the air. The sword glowed brightly, like a swimming dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, pounced towards Ghostly. Ghostly's face was cold, his figure like a ghost, his left hand waved, the soul-devouring stick again flew out, completely disregarding the might of the Dragon Slayer sword, directly struck towards Lin Jingyu's head. Lin Jingyu was surprised. This kind of fighting style was unyielding and brave. Instead, it was more like Lin Jingyu's usual style. Unexpectedly, Ghostly used it on him instead. Just that facing such fierce attacks, Lin Jingyu's competitive pride deep in his character, bit by bit was stimulated. With a loud shout, he indeed disregarded the soul-absorbing stick. The Dragon Slayer sword's force increased. Looked like he was intending to gamble with Ghostly, to see whose guts was bigger. When the two of them fought, it was a life-and-death battle. Lu Sweki, who was watching from the side, could not help but tremble. When she looked over, there was a trace of worry in her eyes. Just when the two of them were about to perish together, Ghostly's body suddenly swayed a few times, like black smoke dispersed in all directions, almost like an illusion. Lin Jingyu could not stop his momentum. His sword pierced through the air and he flew forward. In his heart, he knew something was wrong. In a panic, he turned his head to look, only to see a black figure like a ghost appear behind him, flying towards Anan. This kind of strange skill, naturally was not possessed by Qing Yun's sect, Tian Yin Temple Taoism skills. It was also not seen in the evil faction, but after Ghostly read the 3 volumes of Tian Shu, he slowly comprehended the strange skill from it, and it could not be seen by the common people. Today's test was indeed a great success. Even someone like Lin Jingyu was fooled. Even in Ainan's eyes, she could not help but revealed some bewilderment. Just that for some reason, Ghostly, who had unleashed Tian Shu skill, right now his entire body seemed to be completely different from before. It was not like what the common people imagine it to be: green, gold, red, scarlet. Several energies emerge and turns on his face, indistinctly showing signs of pain, but his body was as swift as the wind, as if his skills had advanced a level. Ainan was bewildered, but indistinctly understood. Different from Lin Jingyu, that year on top of the divine tree in the great swamp in the west, inside the celestial emperor treasury, she and Ghostly had seen the mysterious 3rd volume of the heavenly book at the same time. With her level of talent and aptitude, compared to Ghostly, she had long memorized the heavenly book. Even though the Tian Shu was strange and unfathomable, but between the lines, there were profound principles that were not seen in the world. Cultivators were naturally obsessed with it. If one were to say that she did not study it diligently all these years, it would be a lie. Just that this skill, after all, could not be shared with outsiders. She also did not tell others, and what she saw was only Tian Shu 3rd volume. The front and back were broken, especially without the 1st volume of Tian Shu General Principles. It made her even more clueless, obscure, and difficult to understand. These few years, relying on her own talent and intelligence, forced herself to comprehend. More or less it was beneficial to her own cultivation, but it was not obvious. But it was also because of that. Those Qing Yun sect elders did not discover it. If not Reverend Daoxian, Tian Bui, Shuiwa Master, etc. What kind of people? How would they not notice the strangeness in Ainan's cultivation? At this moment, Lu Sueki saw a ghost Li's strange movements, frowned slightly, but after Ghostly deceived Lin Jingyu, his body again, like an invisible object condensed from the black smoke in the air, swiftly transformed back to his original appearance. His speed did not slow down at all, flew straight towards Lu Sueki. Ainan clenched her teeth, suddenly retreated 3 steps to the side, gave up the Zhu Xian ancient sword behind her, appeared in front of Ghostly. This action shocked Ghostly and Lin Jingyu, who was far away. The difference was that Ghostly's face revealed a trace of joy. Lin Jingyu instead angrily shouted, "Lu Junior sister, what are you doing?" Lu Sueki turned a deaf ear. A glint flashed past her eyes, as if hesitating for a moment, but eventually still with a light shout. Tianya's celestial sword stabbed out against the wind, but where the sword light pointed, it was the opposite direction, 3 chi of empty space in front of the ancient sword. Pooh! A light sound. Tianya's celestial sword seemed to have stabbed empty air, but for some reason, Ainan's body shook, and at the tip of the sword, after a moment of silence, blood splashed out, splattering into the air. And that Ghostly, who was swiftly flying towards Zhu Xian, made a shrill cry in the air, again turned into a puff of black smoke, dispersed in all directions. And in this shocking instant, when the blood splattered like flowers, Lu Sueki's face pale, and in a daze, a roar was suddenly heard. Ghostly's black figure suddenly appeared in the air. Tianya's celestial sword stabbed into his shoulder, but he looked as if he did not feel any pain. Ferociously pounced over, the sinister orb at the tip of the stick turned red. A wave of blood-devouring evil power covered the sky and earth, enveloping Lu Sueki within it. Ainan's countenance turned pale, felt the blood in her body was like boiling water, surging violently, almost about to burst out her body. Her mind buzzed, the pain unbearable. Her legs softened, unable to hold on any longer, sat down. Ghostly made a long cry, his voice mournful. The moment the sinister orb flashed before Ainan's beautiful face, he forcefully pulled it back. At the same time his left hand waved, swept Ainan out. At the same time Ainan flew out, Tianya's celestial sword also followed. The moment the sword was pulled out, Ghostly's shoulder again like a fountain of blood. And Ainan in the air, the sinister orb's evil power was still surging like a tide, surging unceasingly. Her chest was in pain. With a sound, a mouthful of blood spurted out. In the field, Ghostly landed. There was nothing else in his eyes. only that Zhu Xian ancient sword. Right now he was bathed in blood. Half of his body was quickly dyed red, but he seemed to be unaware. His face seemed to have a strange, teeth-clenching pain, staring straight at Zhu Xian ancient sword. The simple and unadorned Zhu Xian ancient sword quietly stabbed into the ground before him. The non-stone and non-jade sword blade could not even reflect his face. Only that faint and thin crack looked as if it was new. Ghostly laughed loudly to the sky. Like a madman, 10 years of time flashed past in an instant. Without a word, his left hand suddenly stretched out to hold the sword hilt. His right hand called back the soul-devouring stick tightly in his hand, fiercely struck towards the Zhu Xian sword blade, towards that thin crack. Lin Jingyu bellowed loudly from behind, pursued with all his might, but it was already too late. Anan had just landed. Her mind was still in a mess, far away. That group of people's clamor suddenly became louder. As if they had discovered something, swiftly rushed over to the illusory moon cave. Just that, in that moment of time, who could do anything? Like, no one in the end could not hold back a moment of time. That soul-devouring stick glimmering with dark green black light whistled down from the sky. Its owner right now was bleeding profusely. Following his left hand down, drop by drop landed on Zhu Xian, streaked past that rough-looking sword blade, slowly disappeared, but not a single drop landed on the ground. Indistinctly, in that instant, Ghost Li's heart moved, as if there was some strange and familiar scene stirred his heart, like lightning flashed past his mind. The next moment, he was suddenly enlightened. It was blood. From the corner of his eyes, in that instant, he saw his own blood, flowing onto the Zhu Xian ancient sword blade, especially when it flowed to that crack, slowly disappeared, swiftly and quietly merged into the ancient sword. Zhu Xian, Zhu Xian, Zhu Xian. Zhu Xian was actually like the sinister orb, able to suck the blood of living things. He was stunned and could not control himself, but the soul-devouring stick in his hand had long surpassed the speed of his thoughts, forcefully hit onto the ancient sword. Chapter 334. Zhu Xian ancient sword did not move. In that instant, everyone seemed to hold their breath, but the scene was eerily quiet. No sound, no rumbling. Ghostly watched the soul-devouring evil stick smashing down with the force of 1,000 caddies. After hitting the Zhu Xian ancient sword, suddenly like falling into a pile of cotton, there was no sound. An angry shout sounded. Figures leapt to the end of the forest. Qing Yun's sect elders appeared one by one, like the wind and lightning flying over, but only saw that Zhu Xian ancient sword was actually in Ghost Li's hand. Immediately, everyone's countenance changed greatly. The next moment, more and more Qing Yun's sect people gathered. In this chaotic time, no one cared about those original prohibitions. One after another rushed into this Qing Yun's sect restricted area. Among them were Small Bamboo Valley 1 men and Big Bamboo Valley people. Once they saw Ghost Li, their countenances also changed greatly. When Min and the rest of the Small Bamboo Valley girls saw Lu Sueki lying lifelessly at the side, quickly rushed over and helped her up. As if disturbed by the Qing Yun's sect people, something was triggered. That Zhu Xian ancient sword, although still in Ghost Li's hand, but for some reason, its blade itself had changed. The original simple and slightly rough, neither stone nor jade sword blade, on that thin crack, because of Ghost Li's ferocious strike, right now looked like it had expanded a few notches. Just that right now from that thin crack, indistinctly a faint red glow, as if the blood that was sucked in became alive in the depths of the sword blade, started to slowly surge. Like the originally calm sea, waves started to rise, brewing an unparalleled storm, shrouding heaven and earth. Silence, silence. Everyone saw the change in Zhu Xian ancient sword, but no one knew what to do. It was quiet in front of the illusory moon cave. Everyone held their breaths and waited, not knowing whose heart was quietly throbbing. Ghostly felt his mouth was parched, subconsciously wanted to let go of Zhu Xian, but the next moment, he discovered the strength in his body seemed to have disappeared in an instant. A familiar yet distant feeling rose again in his body, and this feeling was what his enemies feared. The blood in Ghost Li's body slowly boiled and surged, actually started to have a tendency to rush out, and the direction it was heading towards was the Zhu Xian ancient sword in his hand. Ghostly seemed to understand something, tried his best to let go of Zhu Xian ancient sword, but his hands were powerless, And right now, Zhu Xian Ancient Sword was like an awakened demon, tightly grabbing onto him, unwilling to let him go. Even the soul-devouring stick in his right hand, right now, was also tightly attached to the Zhu Xian Ancient Sword's blade. Zhu Xian Ancient Sword blade, that fine mark. The red light gradually turned from faint to thick, at the same time, like blood flowing through blood vessels. From that fine mark, fine blood color started to spread from both sides of the fine mark, swiftly flowed towards the two halves of the sword blade. The quaint blade was slowly covered by the blood-red color. Everyone was stunned, including those experienced and knowledgeable elders. Right now, everyone knew something was wrong, but no one knew what exactly was going on, and what should they do? And that Zhu Xian Ancient Sword seemed to completely disregard everyone's worries, continued to carry out its own metamorphosis. The faint blood color finally dyed the entire sword blade red. An originally quaint ancient sword, right now, had turned into a strange and mysterious blood-red sword. The sword light, faint red, slowly flowed, like a reborn demon's eyes, slowly waking up, watching the surrounding things. The atmosphere seemed to freeze, until that man holding Zhu Xian suddenly exploded with a heart-wrenching howl of pain. That voice was extremely mournful. Almost everyone was startled, their attention immediately focused on Ghostly. Ghostly's face was pale, his body trembling incessantly. His face, hands that were not covered by clothes, started to visibly and rapidly shrivel, gradually becoming dry. And at the same time, Zhu Xian Ancient Sword emitted a strange whistling sound. The red light became brighter and brighter. Some sharp-eyed people could already see, from Ghostly's left hand holding Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, indistinctly red threads were being absorbed into the sword blade. This scene was extremely strange. There was not a bit of Qing Yun's sex, open and above-board good faction demeanor. Everyone present was stunned, but no one made a move. Except for Lu Sueki, that girl who was originally leaning weakly in her senior sister Wan Min's embrace, but right now, for some reason, suddenly struggled, seemed to want to pounce towards Ghostly and that Zhu Xian Ancient Sword. Wan Min was shocked, quickly pulled her back. Lu Sueki struggled for a few times. Her body eventually drooped down powerlessly. Even though she looked extremely anxious, opened her mouth and wanted to shout something, but she looked around, dejectedly closed her mouth, leaned into the concerned Wan Min senior sister's embrace, her eyes deep, looked at that man. So, after tossing and turning thousands and thousands of thoughts, heartbroken, she actually watched him in front of her own eyes die so tragically. Tears streamed down her face. Finally, she could no longer care about the gazes of the people around her. The red light on Zhu Xian Ancient Sword was already getting stronger and stronger, and on the contrary, Ghostly's condition was getting worse and worse. Now anyone could tell, under the Ancient Sword's divine might, this evil demon evil faction, the good faction's mortal enemy, was already at the edge of death. Maybe this was also the Celestial Sword's spiritual link, casting spells to kill the demon. Many people's hearts quietly thought so, but completely did not want to think whether this thought was reasonable or not. Ghostly naturally would not think, and did not have the time to think about the other's thoughts. Right now, he was struggling before the gates of hell. Zhu Xian Ancient Sword sucking power was getting stronger and stronger. Even to him, it was already much stronger than when he was young, when he met the sinister orb at the back of Big Bamboo Valley. Just that right now his cultivation was already incomparable to that young man. That was why he had struggled till now. However, he also understood he would not be able to hold on for much longer. Zhu Xian Ancient Sword's strange sucking power was similar to the sinister orb's evil power, but there were also differences. Compared to the sinister orb, right now the evil sword's Zhu Xian power was even stronger and different from the sinister orb sucking blood. At the same time the Zhu Xian Ancient Sword sucked blood, it also sucked the many years of cultivation in Ghostly's body. Right now, in Ghostly's eyes, the Zhu Xian Ancient Sword before him emitted blood-red light, indistinctly like a demon opening its bloody mouth, grinning hideously, about to swallow him up. Just like this, ended his life? The moment before he was about to lose consciousness, this thought flashed past his mind. A gush of warm air burst out from his chest. It was pure yang energy, dispersing straight into his meridians. His entire body shook, his mind cleared for a moment, a loud roar, exhausting his lifetime's cultivation. exerting his strength like thunder and lightning in his mind. Tianshu 3 volumes flashed past. Green, gold, red 3 energies rose at the same time, although not very bright, but he regained his vitality. Great Brahman wisdom laid across his heart arteries. Buddhism, true way defended. Even the Zhu Xian ancient sword also paused for a moment. Taking advantage of this moment to catch his breath, Taiji Xianxing Wei as the path, Ghost Li's right hand instantly doubled in thickness. Dark red light sped past, from his arm into the soul-devouring stick. However, just when Ghostly was about to counterattack and escape, Zhu Xian ancient sword's sucking evil power had once again broken through great Brahman wisdom. In that instant, Ghost Li's entire body was paralyzed, unable to move again, and that trace of clarity in his mind again dimmed. Right now, to the others, Ghost Li's face was withered, not far from a dead person. Xavion and the rest who had some friendship with him in the past all turned their heads away, unable to bear to look. And at this moment, it seemed that the outcome had been decided. That soul-devouring stick in Ghost Li's hand suddenly lit up. Dark green light slowly surged, like slowly waking up from a deep slumber. That sinister orb at the top, lines of evil red bloodlines, again lit up, and deep inside the orb, unprecedented, under the dark green light and bloodlines, a golden Buddhism incantation surfaced. Buddhism, Taoism, evil 3 sects true way, at this moment, in Ghost Li's final strike, merged into one. The sinister orb became brighter and brighter. The strange but gorgeous light flickered incessantly, following which, the entire soul-devouring stick lit up, as if it was shouting something. The next moment, from the joint of the soul-devouring stick and Zhu Xian ancient sword, another muffled sound was heard. Everyone then noticed again, other than Ghost Li's left hand, the soul-devouring stick, his right hand, was also connected to Zhu Xian, did not drop down. The light on the sinister orb became brighter and brighter. The 3 colors swayed. A deep, deep voice like an ancient demon god's low moan slowly emitted. Chapter 335. Woo, woo, woo. A stream of red energy, crystal clear, was first sucked out from the sword mark on the Zhu Xian ancient sword, merged into the soul-devouring stick, rolled around in the sinister orb, seemed to still be resisting, but very quickly it could be seen. It was subdued by the strange energy in the sinister orb, slowly turned faint red, a small part assimilated by the soul-devouring stick. Most of it through the stick, re-entered into Ghost Li's body. This strange change, once it started, did not stop. Red energy kept sucking from the ancient sword. Following the increasing amount of red energy, the strengthened soul-devouring light grew stronger and stronger, and Ghost Li's complexion slowly recovered. The skin on his face also gradually recovered from its withered state, strangely revealing a faint warmth. The red light on the ancient sword, right now, seemed to be helpless against the sinister orb's evil power, slowly dimmed down, while the soul-devouring stick became brighter and brighter. The surrounding Qingyun sect people were not blind. Right now, most of them could see that the situation was not right. Now it was clear that Ghostly, this evil person, had secretly casted some kind of evil spell. The Zhu Xian ancient sword actually looked like it could not withstand it. After a wave of commotion in the crowd, suddenly a few shouts were heard. At the same time, a few magical weapons shot towards Ghostly. Ghostly right now was wholeheartedly fighting against the ancient sword. How could he be bothered with the movements around him? Did not have any reaction at all. The next moment, the few magical weapons all hit Ghostly's back. Ghostly's body shook greatly. His blood surged. A sweet taste in his throat. Another mouthful of blood spurted out, spat onto the ancient sword. The ancient sword had already quieted down. Suddenly, with this spurt of blood, a red light flashed. It actually became stronger again. Ghostly could feel it. He could not be bothered with the heavy injuries on his back. His body instead felt that the extremely strange power of Zhu Xian's evil power suddenly increased again. His heart was like lightning and thunder. He understood that right now it was really a matter of life and death. If Zhu Xian regained its power, most likely he would not have another chance and would end up being sucked dry. Thinking to this point, he let out a wild roar, no longer caring about anything else. Using all the strength in his body, his lifetime's worth of cultivation, and the divine ability of the 3 true methods that he had just comprehended into one, he attacked with all his might. The surrounding people did not see Ghost Li's movements. only saw him receiving several attacks from their magical weapons, blood spurting out from his mouth. Zhu Xian Ancient Sword's red light wavered. The moment it looked like it was about to light up, a deafening sharp sound suddenly burst out between Ghost Li and Zhu Xian, accompanied by several sounds of bones cracking. Ghost Li's entire body was thrown out by an enormous, inexplicable force, like an arrow leaving the bow, streaked over. Everyone's heads fell into the distant forest. The Qingyun sect people were inexplicably shocked and stood rooted to the ground. After a long while, someone suddenly came to his senses and shouted, "Quickly, Chase! We must not let that evil person escape." His words reminded everyone, and immediately, countless people chased after Ghost Li. Everyone present could see clearly. Ghost Li was obviously severely injured in the fight with Zhu Xian Ancient Sword. Right now was the best time to chase after him. The surrounding people all leapt up and chased after him. Only Big Bamboo Valley, Small Bamboo Valley people were dumbstruck. Xavion and the rest did not know if they should give chase, but they could not bear to do so, and Wen Min and the rest instead exclaimed. Anan had already fainted. When the Small Bamboo Valley girls were scrambling to save Lu Sweki, suddenly, in the hubbub, a tiny voice was heard. Although the sound was soft, but for some reason, it was as sharp as a thin needle, piercing into every Qingyun sect disciple's heart. That sound was similar to something quietly breaking, coming from beside them, Zhu Xian Ancient Sword. Everyone's face suddenly turned pale, as if that soft sound was the echo of the end of the world. They slowly turned their heads, as if this action required all of their strength. Under everyone's attentive gazes, that legendary Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, quietly inserted into the ground, from the ancient blade that had already widened the fine mark, once again emitted a fine, small cracking sound. The crack slowly grew bigger, slowly but unstoppably extended in all directions, spreading on the ancient and once sacred sword blade, until Zhu Xian Ancient Sword again made a groan. "Ha!" That soft, crisp sound, half of the sword blade together with the sword hilt, fell to the ground, and the other half of the sword blade was still inserted into the ground. In that instant, everyone was stunned. They stopped breathing, and their minds were completely blank. Zhu Xian Ancient Sword. Broken bright heaven and earth, clear sky and bright sun. Suddenly a loud thunder in the horizon rumbled in a blink, but the wind and clouds rolled over from all directions. Heaven and earth rapidly changed color. Dark clouds hung low, gathered at Qingyun Hill. A strong gale blew, sand and stones flew, accompanied by the sudden arrival of wind and rain. Thunder and lightning roared, heaven and earth roared. Violent storm, for a moment, poured down. This firmament, heaven and earth, seemed to be crying bitterly. It was night, heaven and earth wept. The celestial sword died prematurely. The cold rainwater hit the face, like a knife stinging. The chill was dense. The entire body seemed to be frozen. Ghost Li in the forest could not help but quietly humphed. The heavy rain had already been pouring for a full 2 hours, but there was no sign of it weakening, although it was still daytime. But right now the dark clouds hung low in the horizon, enveloping Qingyun like deep night. One would not be able to see one's 5 fingers. And fortunately, Ghost Li was seriously injured. Relying on this sudden violent storm, he was able to temporarily avoid Qingyun sect's pursuit. Just that in that strange confrontation with Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, especially the last strike, Zhu Xian Ancient Sword's recoil force was unstoppable, forcibly entered his body, broke half of his ribs. Right now the broken bones pierced into his heart and lungs. Even though his cultivation was profound, but he was after all still immortal. Every step he took, the pain made him break out in cold sweat, his mouth making hissing sounds. Right now, Ghost Li really wanted to disregard everything, just lie on the ground and fall into a good sleep. Just that the last trace of clarity in his mind kept telling him he must leave with a grudge with Qingyun sect and his current broken body. Once he was discovered by Qingyun sect disciples, most likely he would be dead. And to him, there was still a reason why he could not die. So he forced himself to endure, slowly struggled to run forward. The further away from Qingyun Hill, the safer it would be. The heavy rain poured down, madly pouring into this world, as if to use this heaven's water to wash away the ugliness of the world. Ghost Li panted heavily every time he breathed. In the dark, rainy night, faint white air was emitted. The chill enveloped him. The clamor of the people behind him was getting nearer and nearer, carrying murderous intentions. Very obviously, although Ghostly tried his best to escape forward, but his seriously injured body was far from the speed of the people searching behind him. Just that Qing Yun Hill was deep in the dense forest, the sky was also dark, so temporarily he was not discovered. Just that, Ghostly understood, like this, eventually it was unavoidable. His feet staggered, as if he tripped over a tree branch or something like a vine. His body unsteady, fell forward. In his panic, he stretched out his hands to grab. Luckily, he grabbed onto a small tree beside him and with great difficulty steadied his body. But with this torment, under the violent movements, the pain in his chest penetrated deep into his bones, almost unable to breathe, not to mention striding to escape. The voices behind him suddenly neared, as if in this heavy storm, someone had heard the strange sounds. Under the command, many footstep sounds headed towards Ghostly's direction to search. Ghostly's heart turned cold, but in the end he was unwilling to surrender. Just that even if he ran for his life now, he would not be able to escape. He hardened his heart, closed his eyes, his entire body quietly slid onto the muddy ground, face down, buried in the mud. In the darkness, he seemed like a pile of mud abandoned by this stormy world. Footsteps, clamor, slowly gathered over. Many people were cursing and at the same time using the things in their hands to hit the surrounding trees and brambles. A strong wind swept past, not knowing how many people were swarming over. Ghostly in the darkness, sprawled on the ground motionless, his heart seemed to have stopped beating, in the darkness, quietly waiting for the judgment of his fate. Heaven and earth are heartless. Maybe all living things are straw dogs. The storm was raging. Chapter 336. The violent storm still did not look like it was going to stop. In the darkness, spots of light swept past. Those were the magical weapons in the hands of the Qing Yun disciples, borrowing the light from the weapons, searching in the storm. This place was already close to the outskirts of Qing Yun Hill's rear mountain. The dense forest was dense. Ancient trees were overgrown. The vegetation was extremely dense. In addition, the weather was extremely bad. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the horizon. The thunder rumbled. From time to time, there would be a streak of sky splitting, lightning striking down from the horizon, landing in the forest, often splitting a tree. It was really hair-raising. Before the might of heaven and earth, those slightly weaker Qing Yun disciples could not help but palpitate, trembling with fear. And in the darkness, those spots of light looked like trembling fireflies, fluttering incessantly, only illuminating a small area around them. Rumble. In the dark clouds in the horizon, another shocking thunder exploded. The people on the ground felt their ears ringing, could not help but turn pale. Searching for Ghostly until now had passed 4 hours, but still did not find any trace of him. Many of them started to mutter in their hearts. Could it be that this evil person had escaped? Actually, it was not without reason. Ghostly is the evil sect, Ghost King sect vice head. His skills were superb. Although he looked like he was injured by the Zhu Xian ancient sword 4 hours ago, but who knew how serious his injuries were? As long as he was not seriously injured to the point of death, most likely Ghostly would have the ability to quietly escape. This thought secretly reverberated in many of the Qing Yun disciples' minds, just that their teachers were urging and scolding them behind their backs. Eventually, they did not dare to give up and could only continue the search. Little did they know, not far ahead of them in the darkness, Ghostly was seriously injured, almost dying, unable to escape, holding on to his last strand of hope, crawling in the mud. In the dim darkness, someone suddenly shouted, "Stop! Everyone stop!" This person's voice traveled far in the darkness. Even the thunder in the horizon could not drown out his voice. Evidently, he was a highly skilled senior. Ghostly lay motionless on the ground, allowing the rain to hit his body. Hearing this voice, he felt it was somewhat familiar, but for the moment he could not recall who this person was. But it was clear that the surrounding Qing Yun disciples were extremely convinced and respectful of this person. Almost at the same time a shout was heard. The Qing Yun disciples who heard it immediately stopped in their tracks, stood where they were, no longer speaking. Amidst the wind and rain, the noisy search suddenly quietened down. There was only the faint sound of someone's breathing in the forest. The wind and rain became more and more urgent. Someone seemed to be listening carefully to something. Ghostly felt a chill abruptly seeping into his heart and lungs, his entire body icy cold, a strange creepy feeling. It was as if this strange silence was even more frightening than the loud shouts of the search just now. After a while, a soft voice suddenly said, "Father, what's wrong? Did you hear something?" Ghostly's heart shook. This voice was very familiar to him. It was his once good friend, Zhang Shushu. The next moment, he knew who the elder commanding this area was. It was Return of the Wind Valley leader, Zhang Shuchang, also Zhang Shushu's father. And the Qingyun disciples searching in this area most likely were also Return of the Wind Valley disciples. Zhang Shuchang had been renowned for a long time. He was indeed not an ordinary person. In the ruckus of the wind and rain, he could still hear the strange sound made by Ghostly, just that right now in the dark forest in front of him. He could not even see his fingers if he stretched out his hand. Other than the wind and rain, there was no other news. Even he himself could not help but suspect if he had heard the extremely faint strange sound, or if it was caused by the many people searching together, startled some animals, and ran away. After a moment of silence, Zhang Shuchang frowned in the darkness, waved his hand, and said, "All disciples split up, form a line. The distance must not be more than 3 chi. Slowly search ahead. Not a single gap can be missed." Ghostly was shocked. Such a meticulous search. He almost had no chance to escape. Just when he was shocked, he heard Zhang Shushu's anxious voice said, "Father, this forest is so big. You sent the disciples here to search so intensively. Won't it mean that other places will not be able to search?" Zhang Shuchang indifferently said, "I have my reasons. You don't have to say more. Quickly go." Zhang Shushu was stunned in the darkness, did not dare to speak anymore, turned and moved forward. In the darkness, no one spoke for a moment, but the spots of light could be seen, slowly moving forward in the wind and rain, gradually turning into a long snake, slowly advancing. For some reason, the atmosphere in this part of the forest suddenly became strange. When the hubbub just now, everyone was agitated and instead no one was afraid. Right now this silence, for some reason, made one's hair stand on end. Because of the cultivation level magical weapons, the magical weapons in the hands of the Qingyun disciples generally could not shine very far. The brightness was also rather limited, just that they were connected to each other, slowly advancing. Very soon, the distance to where Ghostly was hiding was only 2 zhang away. "Wait!" Suddenly, Zhang Shuchang loudly shouted. Several of the Qingyun Hill Return of the Wind Valley disciples who were scattered nearby stopped at the same time. Zhang Shushu was shocked, walked to his father. With the help of the magical weapon's light, Zhang Shuchang's face was filled with solemnity. "What is it, father?" Zhang Shuchang's eyes were deep, staring straight ahead into the darkness, but what his eyes were thinking about was not the place where Ghostly was hiding. Instead, he was looking at the distant and serene dense forest ahead. In that deepest darkness, there seemed to be nothing, but also seemed to be filled with innumerable demonic figures and ghosts, roaring and dancing wildly in the wind and rain. Something is not right. Under the dim light, the wrinkles on Zhang Shuchang's face seemed to suddenly become deeper. His eyes showed some fear, but he was after all not an ordinary person. After many years of cultivation, his will was firm. After a cold snort, he had already made a decision. "Zhang," a light whistle. Everyone was shocked. Zhang Shuchang actually wielded his celestial sword. The sword light appeared silvery white, flickering in and out of the dark wind and rain, bright and dazzling, completely different from the surrounding Qingyun disciples. But he was silent for a moment, loudly said, "I will walk in front. All of you do not change, still according to what we said just now. Form a line to search, but you must follow behind me at a distance of 1 zhang. Do not come near." Everyone by now more or less knew something was wrong, but with Zhang Shuchang there, everyone had their backbone. Zhang Shuchang's face was solemn, holding his sword and walking in front of the group. The surrounding people were still the same, just that they maintained a distance of 1 zhang from Zhang Shuchang, did not dare to come near. This strange group just continued to move forward slowly. The strange atmosphere seemed to be in this dense forest in this stormy night, gently panting woo, woo, like the howling of the wind and rain, and also like the roar of a wild beast. But abruptly, he discovered that it seemed to be his own heartbeat. That heart seemed to be beating faster and faster. Zheng Shuchang's old face reflected the light on the celestial sword, became heavier and heavier, deep in the forest ahead, indistinctly a mysterious hostility, although the feeling was somewhat blurry, as if he could not even be sure if it was the enemy, but the waves of strange palpitation in his heart still made him unable to belittle it. That feeling, he had not felt it for a long time. He still remembered the last time, but it seemed to be 100 years ago he and Tian Bui and the rest followed Wan Jianyi's senior brother into the wildlands, directly attacked the evil sex lair. Time passed, so it had been so long in a blink of an eye. But not knowing, the Wan's senior brother who died young had reincarnated yet. This strange thought suddenly emerged in his mind. Even he himself could not help but felt surprised and amused. He inhaled deeply, pulled himself together. For some reason, today was really different from the past. Rumble. Another shocking thunder suddenly exploded. The might of heaven and earth for a moment shook heaven and earth, as if the ground under his feet also shook a few times. Almost at the same time, in the firmament, a bolt of lightning tore the vast sky, broke through the clouds, descended to the mortal world. Like the sharp blade of the heaven, slashing towards the mortal world. Everyone was shocked. The disciples were moved. Some could not control themselves. Suddenly one of them was looking up at the firmament, tripped and fell. In his exasperation, almost cursed out. Unexpectedly, when he turned around to look, he was shocked to see that under the illumination of the lightning, in front of him was a muddy body, lying motionless on the ground. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.